It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Welcome to One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. I'm Michael Calamari, here with Thomas Aiello. We'll be with you from 11 to 2 a.m. on 90.7 FM and YouTube Live. Thomas, before we get into the sports, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good, Mike, and I wanted to say happy 4th of July weekend to everyone that's listening into our show, and I hope you guys enjoy all the barbecue that you want. Get out on a boat, go to the ocean, go to the beach, whatever you do. So I hope you guys enjoy your 4th of July weekend. But Mike, I'm ready to talk some sports with you today. I know we've got an action-packed show, so I think I'm ready to go. I'm ready to knock it out.
No, yeah, it's going to be a great time on the show. We got a lot of sports to talk about. I mean, we're in the midst of an MLB season that's starting to heat up as we get close to the All-Star break. And as the Subway Series is here, there's a lot to talk about with the Mets and the Yankees. They will be seeing each other this weekend, so we haven't seen a game yet that is going to happen today. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And these are two teams that are searching for wins and trying to get ahead early in this season.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I guess we say with the Yankees and the Mets, kind of been a roller coaster of a season for both of them. They've been hot and they've gone cold. There's more so for the Yankees. They've been cold than hot. And for the Mets, I mean, they're just getting annihilated with injuries. But we finally got us a Subway Series with fans in the building for the first time, and God knows how long it's been at this point. And it's pride for the city. You know, the Yankees and Mets are fighting for city pride and bragging rights, and this is huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really fun to talk about. We're going to be joined by Ryan Gregware and Sam Davis, our Mets and Yankees beat reporters, so that will be a lot of fun. We also see Bryan Hoch at 11:45. We are interviewing him, all things Yankees. There's a lot to talk about in that interview. We break down Aaron Boone, Brian Cashman. Are they on the hot seat? How is his Yankee team doing? So a lot there. And we're also going to be joined by Mike Messina for MLB All-Star Game talk, which is just around the corner. So, Thomas, it's going to be interesting to see as this All-Star Game approaches. We just got the starters announced. There's some snubs we're going to talk about later in the show that I think we both find really intriguing.
There definitely are a lot of intriguing people that have been left off and put on the All-Star starting roster in respective to who's playing. But we were doing the pre-show, Mike, and I had a one or two hot takes that I was getting flamed by you for, and I had to change them. But I think our lists for who's been snubbed, I think people will like who we have and what we have to say about those people. So that's definitely going to be a fun discussion.
No, yeah, I think there's at least one or two guys we can all agree upon that have been left on this list. We're going to talk about that a lot and in detail with Mike Messina later. And we're also in the midst of the Stanley Cup Finals, which has really been interesting. I mean, it's really been dominated by the Lightning. And there's a lot to talk about there. Vasilevsky's been great in goal for Tampa Bay. They've been dominating offensively, outscoring the Canadiens by over 10 goals in this series. So that's been a great watch if you're a hockey fan. But if you're a Canadian fan, it has been an awful watch. Your team is down 3 games in this series, and you're really backs against the wall. And it's looking like you're going to go out with a sweep if you don't get things together.
Yeah, certainly it's been a tough time for those poor Canadian fans. And I know that they're used to winning with their pedigree, and boy, this has been a tough series for them. But I think Tampa Bay, the city of Tampa, should not only have a Tom Brady statue, but now an Andrei Vasilevsky statue next to the Tom Brady statue in the city because of just how great and how dominant he is. They should just start building that immediately. We'll get to why he'll be the Stanley Cup MVP, but they should start building that statue.
100%. I mean, he's been tremendous in goal. We'll get to that. I mean, this whole Tampa Bay offense has just been killing the Canadiens all series long. And they've shown that throughout the entire year. And listen, the Canadiens are a team that have had their backs against the wall numerous times this year, and they found ways to put it together. But it just feels like this time it won't be able to happen. They'll come up short. But listen, Monday night's the next game. We're going to talk about it later in the show. So there's a lot there, and we're going to get into it with Mike Messina. We're also going to get into some other headlines talk, like Washington football team, that news surrounding there, and also the NCAA, which has recently allowed athletes to now profit off of their image and likeness, which is something that has been a major issue in previous years. And it's finally culminated in them allowing this to happen.
I want to give a shout out to Florida men's basketball player Patrick Kelly, who announced on his Instagram at the time of this recording that he has joined the Barstool Athletes group. So congratulations to Patrick. And I'm excited for all of these NCAA athletes to finally get the spotlight that they have deserved for all these years. And you unfortunately feel for guys like Zion Williamson, who had their names and brands kind of used, but never received any reparation for it. And now I guess the NCAA and these athletes are now going to kind of be avenging that. So it's great to see that they're going to start making some money, a little bit of profit off of their name, maybe get some recognition. And who knows, maybe this is a path to having them go pro in some of their respective sports. So good job on the NCAA's part for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a long time coming. These players have basically been not used. I mean, they're having seasons. They are, being able to participate in all these sports, which is an experience alone for them. But these companies like the TV networks, the NCAA, are multi-billion-dollar industries, and they are benefiting from these players' image and likeness, like Trevor Lawrence, like Williamson, Kate Cunningham. These are guys that really are the reason people watch NCAA sports. And for those reasons, these multi-billion-dollar companies are profiting on them. So I think it's about time that the playing field levels out a little bit, and these players get a chance to get their money. And I think we're going to get into a lot of that about that later in the show. Another headline that's been circulating is Sha'Carri Richardson, who will not be participating in the Olympics after testing positive for marijuana usage. And this has been another topic that's been circulating around the sports world, a tremendous amount, a bunch of athletes coming out on Twitter, voicing their displeasure for this decision. And we're going to get into a lot about that, but it's definitely a crazy thing because she was one of the favorites to win this 100-meter dash on the women's side.
Yeah, I mean, when Patrick Mahomes quote retweets that this has to end, I think you're doing something wrong. And, we'll get into this later, but the whole thing about the cannabis and athletes, I think some of these rules are a little bit egregious at this point, because you kind of know that weed is legal in 19 of the 50 United States in America right now. So it's sort of a counterintuitive rule, but at the same time, there is a discussion to be had about it. And Sha'Carri Richardson, I feel really bad for her. She kind of gets robbed of her dreams to go to the Olympics. And like you said, she was a favorite to win the 100-meter dash. Obviously, America has a great pedigree in track and field, especially in the 100-meter on the women's side. So to see one of the best get robbed like that is a little disappointing.
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to get into that tons later. And we're going to end the show with around the world. We're going to go into Europe. We got two big tournaments going on right now, both played on grass, one on the court, one on the field. On the field, European Championship, we got a bunch of good teams left. Italy beat Belgium. Spain, they advanced. Italy and Spain will be playing each other. We're going to talk about that. That's going to be a lot of fun because this Italy team looks like a resurgence of their old ways, a great defensive team, and they score timely goals. So they could be bringing potentially a trophy back after missing the World Cup qualifiers the previous year.
Mike, I've never left the East Coast. Fun fact.
That is crazy. I did not know.
I've never left the East Coast. So like the fact that we're going to go on a hypothetical journey to Europe, that I'm excited. I packed my bag last night. I got all my suitcases ready to go, my passport. So I'm ready to go on my first trip to Europe. So that's going to be fun. So let's do it. Let's go sightseeing.
And the other tournament, we got Wimbledon, which is going to be a ton of fun to talk about because Novak Djokovic has really been so dominant since winning Roland Garros, the previous tournament, French Open. So he is like the guy to beat right now. And it seems like there's not a lot of guys that can really challenge him. Federer's aging, Zverev, Medvedev. These are guys that potentially could overtake him, but it's going to be really tough for anybody. And then on the women's side, it's really a wide open field with no Naomi Osaka. And it seems like it could be anybody for the taking. Barty's in there, and there's a lot of people that have a chance, but it's still going to be a fun talk. Coco Gauff wins this morning, so she's also advancing to the quarterfinals. there's a lot of people that could win in that women's side. And then on the men's side, Novak Djokovic really looks like the guy who's the leader and the guy to beat.
Yeah, this has definitely been one of the wilder Wimbledons we've seen in a while. Obviously, with all of the favorites on the women's side not participating or eliminated in some way. We had Serena forfeit because of an injury. So the playing field and the bracket is as wide open as I can remember it being, because I just remember Serena just steamrolling pretty much everyone that stood in her way. And on the men's side, Novak Djokovic, once again proving why he is the best men's tennis player in the world, just outright, again, steamrolling everyone that stands in his way. But I don't know. There's some of these young kids that are in that tennis field right now in the gentleman's single draw. They're pretty good, Mike. They're pretty good.
Yeah, it's going to be another great talk. I mean, we got a lot of sports to talk about. We're going to get to all that soon. We're going to start with Mets Yankees after this short break, joined by Ryan Gregware and Sam Davis. We'll be right back after this break.
One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back to One on One. I'm Michael Calamari here with Thomas Aiello, and we're joined now by Sam Davis and Ryan Gregware. Now, there's a lot to talk about here. Subway Series approaching, and it seems like both these teams need to win this series to really make a big jump. The Yankees want to leap into the wild card standings. They're about 6 games back right now. The Mets are holding on to the first place with dear life as the Nationals and the Braves slowly creep up. And Ryan, I want to start with you just to kick off the discussion. How much you think this series means for the Yankees? Obviously, they're 4th in the AL East right now. How big is this Subway Series for the Yankees?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for you, Mike. Thanks, Thomas, for having me on. I appreciate it. This series means as much as possible as a July kind of opening of July series could mean. Like, the Yankees absolutely need these wins. You cannot deny that, Mike. Coming off losing 2 of 3 in a shortened series versus the Angels, like, you need to win these games. It's really like, I don't know how many more times I can say it. The division right now looks really, really bad. Wild card 6 back, as you just said. So, obviously we're in July, so it's not like crazy to say they're out of it or whatever, but they need to win games. That's just the bottom line here.
Ryan, Thomas here. The Yankees, I've been looking at their schedule, and they only have a couple weeks or so really until the trade deadline. And I was saying this the other day. I was talking to a friend. They need to go on some kind of magical run, and they better do something. Do you think that with this players only meeting that they recently had, how much of a sense of urgency do you think they're going to be playing with in this series? And do you think that they can really build on this going forward?
I think calling the meeting says everything about the urgency, because I think when they asked Aaron Judge yesterday, he said something along the lines of, it just couldn't wait till the All-Star break. Normally you do something like that at the All-Star break, which is only a week or so out, but it could not wait. This team needed that now. And so I think that kind of shows with the aggressiveness of calling the meeting and everything. But 100%, as you said, urgency is a weird thing because obviously like they're trying to win every game they play. So I don't know how much that plays a role, but they understand that these are huge games and they can't keep dropping ones like they did Wednesday. And so I think that's what the players meeting tells you.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that Hal Steinbrenner press conference, especially because he admitted to some of the blame being on him, Aaron Boone, Brian Cashman's part, but it was really to call out those players. And he said that they need to step up. And at a certain point, do you get to a place like this on-field product, this team that you envisioned being the best potential in the AL and making a bid for the World Series, that's not that team anymore. Like, how long, if you're Hal Steinbrenner, do you just wait around and say these guys are proven and they'll eventually turn around? Because if you didn't know the names of these players, you would look at this team and say they are not close to being a playoff team. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that maybe are you a little too comfortable with knowing this roster in previous years and you're not trusting what you're seeing this season, which has really been a letdown. So I think that's probably the biggest question, is how much longer are you waiting for this team to turn it around?
Well, here is the one issue with what you just said. We do know the names of these players. We do know what's on the back of the baseball card throughout their careers. So, like, you have to assume, baseball is such a weird game, that a DJ LeMahieu is going to turn around. It looks like he has recently. With Gleyber Torres, we're in the beginning of July, he has 3 homers. That's one of the most shocking developments, I think, in all of baseball. He had 38 in 2019. He has 3 homers were in July. So, like, I think, it's a really good question, Mike, and I just don't have an answer because every time I'm on a show, like, you think they're going to turn around, you think they will, but they still have not done so. We know they have the talent to do it on the back of the baseball card. That shows. But right now, those players are just not those guys that are going out and performing how they've been. And it's a reason this team's been so inconsistent, and we're talking about them the way we are right now.
I want to jump in real quick there. I know I'm not the Yankees expert like Ryan and maybe Mike is a fan, but for me, I think going back to that kind of players meeting that they had, I think that's kind of a huge sign, because that's been one of the biggest criticisms of Aaron Boone so far this year, not showing kind of that fire, not showing that sense of urgency that I think collectively this organization needs to show at this point. Like Ryan's saying, these are games that you have to win now. These are series you have to win now. Showing that urgency by calling that meeting, maybe that's something that kind of lights a fire around a lineup that should be better. We've talked about it all year. It's just been the constant conversation. This lineup is good. Why aren't they performing? Maybe this sense of urgency, maybe this meeting, maybe something like that can turn things around. And no better series to do it, in my opinion, than the Subway Series. You're facing your crosstown rivals, a team that has stole the storyline basically all year, sat in first place. This is a chance to kind of flip things around. Both teams, I think, really need this series, especially the Yankees.
Sam, I wanted to kind of roll off of a point you brought up with the competitive fire that the Yankees really need to light, like right now. And we know that the Yankees are a classy organization, and they mostly have respectable players that really try not to do anything too controversial. I mean, you have exceptions with Alex Rodriguez, I guess would be as the modern example. You could say Paul O'Neill. What's up?
I said, don't bring that name up around Ryan. That's his man right there. That's his guy.
I know. Well, I love A-Rod too, but you have to admit he was a bit controversial. Paul O'Neill as well was a fiery kind of player. But when I look at this Yankees team, and I know I just said it, but they might have one too many introverts on the roster. I think that kind of is a bad thing. That might be part of it. But, we have DJ LeMahieu, who's quiet. Gleyber Torres is kind of a monotone guy. Don't really hear much from Urshela. Look, if this Yankees team maybe had a couple more fiery type of Paul O'Neills, or I'll just throw a name out there, Amir Garrett, who I'm a big fan of because of his just attitude on the mound, who I just absolutely love that. Could that maybe change the dynamic a little bit more if they were to have some of those? Maybe at the trade deadline, they go get someone like that? Or is it more of you got to fix it from within. Where do you guys stand on something like that?
I'll take that because I think at the bottom line, it doesn't matter your personality if you are playing good baseball, right? Like that, this is the same team that won 103 games in 2019. It practically is the same roster. So I don't think it matters that DJ LeMahieu is on the more quiet side. I really don't. It's interesting because that was a criticism of Aaron Judge and kind of like, he doesn't have that vocal leadership that you'd expect from your best player, your star, all that stuff. All the people calling him for captain, that was a criticism. But him calling the players meeting, I think, shows a lot. You talked about that fire. Luke Voigt certainly has that fire. His return, some thought justified that could be where this season turns around. That's the spark. That's their 09 A-Rod to make a comparison. But it hasn't been so far. So I don't know the personalities. I think it's more important at the trade deadline, if they're going to do whatever, that they get good players rather than good personalities, because I think that's how you win. It doesn't really matter how quiet or loud they are.
Yeah, I want to shift a little bit to the other team in this game. The Yankees obviously playing the Mets.
This whole time I got to talk here. Come on.
I know. Listen, Yankees rule this town, but there's still a team in Queens we want to talk about that will be in the Bronx this weekend. Sam, I want to get your opinion on where the Mets team is right now. Obviously, the hitting is slacking a little bit. You get a guy like Brandon Nimmo back. That should help them. But the list of guys who are hitting well right now is really short. Is that a big concern for this Mets team?
Yeah, it is. I think right now the concern in general is relatively high, and it's not just with the hitting. Obviously, the hitting has been bad. There's no mistaking that. But then you go outside of the hitting as well, and we're starting to see some of the depth in the starting pitching go away, and that's the real big strong suit of this Mets team, which is what makes this almost even more concerning because the offense isn't really picking up the slack for where the pitching is right now. I think David Peterson, his loss is relatively big because he's been pitching pretty well in his last start wasn't good, but before that he had 3 really good starts in a row. Looked like he was starting to turn things around. And then now he's going to be on the IL, and it's not going to be 10 days. It's going to be probably about a month, if not more. So that's certainly a big loss. Lucchesi gone for the year, another loss. The back end of that rotation is right now non-existent. You have guys from AAA, you have guys that are having to make big starts, even in prime time like this in a potential Subway Series game. Not really a good place for the back of the rotation to be in. I think, getting Carrasco back might help for that. But to answer your question about the offense, I am worried just because it's somewhat of a similar conversation we've been having with the Yankees all year. I'm looking at this lineup on paper, and I'm not saying the Yankees lineup isn't as good. I'm just saying I'm looking at the Mets lineup on paper, and I'm saying these guys should be hitting and should be producing a lot better than they are. Conforto, Nimmo's coming back. McNeil has been terrible since he's come back. Even Lindor hasn't been great, although he's starting to turn things around. Pete Alonso, you go down the list. I mean, that's a pretty good lineup. And this lineup, there was no expectation for this lineup to be bad. Going into the year, this lineup was expected to be very good. So the fact that they're underperforming by far, obviously, down in the bottom in terms of runs per game, definitely concerning. And then you combine that with the lack of starting pitching depth, it's definitely, and then also the Nats are starting to play well in the division. Everything seems to be kind of going wrong at once for this Mets team, and you got to hope that lineup can figure things out pretty soon.
Yeah, Sam, I also wanted to piggyback off of that the Nationals team, because they started the year off pretty poorly, I would say. I think we can agree that they were not the best of teams. Now, they're also a little banged up. Strasburg, just his body is refusing to let him actually get on the mound. And that's obviously a big part of their thing is their pitching. You have Max Scherzer and Patrick Corbin, who's been a disappointment. But the NL East has been, I guess the word is an average bloodbath, because I think some of these teams have been wildly underperforming or just terribly average at points. I mean, the Mets, I guess, could be the exception, but Philadelphia, they're really not out of it. You can't count out a Girardi team, as Mike and I and Ryan know as Yankee observers. You got the Braves, who are going to eventually figure it out at some point. And then you've got the Nationals, who are they're too talented of a team to not be this bad. So, and the Mets are getting healthy, like you said. They're starting to have guys come back. And granted, they're not playing well, but if the Mets, I think the Mets can win this division. But someone needs to yell at Francisco Lindor to start hitting the baseball, because even though his WAR is
getting there, he's slowly starting to pick
very slowly.
Very slowly. He needs to be yelled at more, I think, even though his WAR is still top 5 on the Mets. And we've seen Josh Donaldson rumors as a potential trade target for him to come into Queens and kind of do some damage with the bat. And I mean, that is what he does. What kind of effect do you think that could have if you get a player like Donaldson? Do you think maybe, I don't know, does Pete Alonso maybe get going now that he's got someone else in the lineup who can hit for power? Does Conforto start to hit? Maybe Lindor starts to pick it up. Where do you stand on that, Sam?
I don't think just Donaldson being introduced to this clubhouse is going to make the guys like Nimmo, Conforto, Alonso hit. They kind of have to do that on their own. And I think they will. I really do. I look at what they've done in the past. I look at the players they can be. And at the end of the day, I do trust that they're going to turn things around. You gotta think about when guys come back from injury, especially being away for a long period of time, you don't just jump right back into it and start hitting immediately. That's just way too much to ask. And a lot of fans ask that, especially when you come back in July, August, even later months where games are really important. You expect guys like Conforto, Nimmo to just come back and hit right away. It's not going to happen. Might take a little time, but I think they can get there. Donaldson would definitely help. I mean, that third base position has been a little bit of a mystery this year. I mean, JD Davis has been hurt most of the year, so we don't really know what we get there. He's always good offensively, but defensively has definitely struggled. And then VR has been a good piece for them, but certainly maybe not the future as an everyday starter. Who really knows? So Donaldson would definitely help. I think, adding a little bit of power to this offense definitely wouldn't hurt, especially because of all the struggles they've been going through. But for me, I think getting a back end of rotation piece would be definitely something this Mets team should also consider, because right now there are two spots in that rotation that are basically bullpen games. And that was the case when Peterson and Lucchesi were pitching briefly because they weren't pitching well. But now that they started to pitch well and then got hurt, you really need a guy back there, I think, especially because Carrasco, you don't know when he's coming back. So for me, you're going to look for offense, obviously, because that's one of the biggest issues with this team. But you also got to look for starting pitching. I think a back end of the rotation piece would definitely help this team as well.
Sam, Ryan, thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll let you get back to the game now. And but thank you for giving up your time and joining us.
Always a pleasure. Good to see you guys.
Thomas, I want to get back into the Yankees a little bit. We just touched on Yankees with Ryan. We did a little Mets with Sam, but there's still a lot to talk about with this Yankees team. I mean, it's been a team that's really been riddled with non-existent bats. And then when the bats start to heat up, it looks like the pitching just completely falls down. And it's really a concern if you're a Yankee fan, if you're in that clubhouse. Obviously, Hal Steinbrenner addressing it in his press conference, but the time is really now to reverse it. And if let's say you lose 2 out of 3 against this Mets team this series, there's going to be increasing pressure if you get to 500 about getting below 500 or watching your games pile up behind the wild card spot. I mean, this is a really big concern for this Yankee team, and it's not going to get any better by just sitting around and hoping things get better. Obviously, you trade for Tim LeCastro, but he doesn't really give you much of a bat. He's got really good speed in center, and he's a good glove, but he's hitting 175 this year. So he's not going to add anything that you don't have right now. And the Yankees talk about being buyers at this deadline and be willing to go over the luxury tax, but this team isn't really close at all. And I've been talking about it before, how I don't think it's even worth it to go out and get a guy, but they seem still increasingly confident about this roster that's shown nothing thus far that would make you believe they're a playoff team. And that's the biggest thing that I think I find concerning about the current state of the Yankees.
Mike, I'm going to give you a LeBron James example because I see the poster in the background. I know that you're a big LeBron guy. Do you remember when the Cavaliers basically shed their entire team in 2018 and revamped the roster at the trade deadline within, I don't know, what was it, 3 or 4 days? Do you remember that?
100%. I mean, trade Kyrie Irving. I mean, not even then, but when you traded Kyrie Irving, you get Isaiah Thomas. And when that doesn't work out, you make an overhaul for Lakers guys, Jordan Clarkson.
Yeah.
That really didn't work out.
Right. So I don't think the Yankees should they're going to do something. They're not going to do that. I don't know if roster overhaul at the trade deadline, especially in baseball, it's bound to fail. I think that would just not be a smart move on Cashman's part. Now, whether he would do that on save the team or the season, I have no idea. But I think trying to make a zillion trades to fix all of the problems at once might not work. I think it's better they should just do nothing this year. Okay, they maybe should honestly do it internally because there is some minor league players that they have in the system that are not terrible that you can perhaps call up, like Hoy-Jun Park. We've been hearing a lot about Luis Medina, who's a pitcher who honestly could be really good. and Davy Garcia, we haven't seen much of him as of late. Maybe you got to try some younger guys out. I have no idea. But the thing that's wrong with the Yankees, and Ryan said it best, the urgency is not there. Now, Aaron Judge calling that players only meeting, that says a lot about who he is, what he's turned into as a player. And we know that people are parading for him to be the Yankee captain. I wouldn't have agreed with you about 2 or 3 years ago on that, but now that he's doing these things, calling a players only meeting, I think so. But for the Yankees, in terms of making moves, I don't know what they should honestly do. They should just really do nothing. I think there's players on this roster that value has just dipped so drastically to the point where you really can't trade them. Like Clint Frazier got in his own head. He's not the player we once thought that he would be. I don't know what you do with Gleyber Torres. I also don't think he's a full-time shortstop. I do not like that idea at all. Now, I know that people will tell me, but he's an above average fielder because his defensive WAR is positive. Now, that might be an argument you can make, but when it drops from 3.6 in 2019, skipped last year, but this year it's 0.2. Yeah, I think it's an area for concern. So just those are some of the things. And the pitching, like you said, has fallen flat on its face. I don't know. I honestly think they should do nothing at this trade deadline. I really don't think they should do anything.
Yeah, I really don't see the Yankees as buyers too. I agree with you. I think doing nothing is a little bit of is interesting to me because I don't think the Yankees should do nothing. I think they should either make a move to sell pieces and re-put together that bottom of the order that's really struggling, or like if you were to be buyers, you need to be big buyers. I mean, it's not going to just take Ketel Marte to turn this lineup around. Granted, if you get that guy, which is a big question mark, it would take another big starting pitcher. It might take 1 or 2 bats. And are the Yankees willing to do that and go that much over the luxury tax and have to worry about those contracts down the line? I'm not sure if they are. And I think that's where, if you're the Yankees, you have to try to adopt a more Tampa Bay Ray mentality where you build it up from the bottom, you sell, and you have minor leaguers that come up and feed into your team and help you win ball games. I mean, they're first in division. They seemingly have the worst roster in the AL East every year outside the Baltimore Orioles, but they always are ahead of the Yankees. I don't see how that's possible when the Yankees are always buying and never winning. So I'm not sure if buy is still the answer. I think you have to put together, retool this roster using guys you have in your system, develop your players. And this might take a year or 2 to happen, but it's not going to be by going out and just buying these players and hoping that it's going to turn around guys that already stink on your team. That's not going to happen. And I hear the other side of the argument where it's, you have to maximize this core right now. But in all honesty, this core is not playing well. If you look at the guys since Aaron Boone has gotten there, Gary Sanchez has arguably gotten worse since Boone's gotten there. His first 2 years in the league, his highest batting average and highest OPS. There's an argument to say he's gotten worse. Now he's hitting really well right now. He's hot bat, and his defense has gotten slightly better. But I don't think the trajectory of Gary Sanchez is what any Yankee fan would have liked. Clint Frazier, he's gotten worse. He's hitting under 200 this year. Aaron Hicks has gotten worse since signing that extension. He's not healthy right now, but he was a 0 bat when he was. Gleyber Torres, another one. His power numbers have plummeted. He only has 3 homers this year, and he has like 4 hits in his last 50 at-bats. So you look at all these guys that have really declined since Aaron Boone has gotten there. And I think that is a testament to the down in batting average and down in hitting across the MLB this year. But there's still something to be said about the development that the Yankees have. And I don't think that Aaron Boone, Brian Cashman have done a good job at developing these players. And I'm not a fan of taking out a manager mid-season. I don't think that's good for any clubhouse. But at the end of the year, a serious decision has to be made as Boone's contract's up is if you're going to let this guy go or not. And I don't think the player development that you've seen with his players has been enough to say this is a guy we want back.
I think it's safe to say Boone is more than likely gone after the end of the year. I don't think Yankee fans can stand him. I don't know if Hal Steinbrenner, as much as they're friends and him and Cashman are friends, I don't know how much that they can tolerate him anymore with just the losing and the base running mistakes, things that you watch in the Yankee games and they make middle school errors just bother me especially. They just bother anybody, but it really gets on my nerves when you're a professional baseball player playing for the Yankees, which is probably considered the highest standard in baseball if you think about it that way. And they make middle school errors. I think that's just unacceptable. Now, that's just me being a nitpicker, but you also have to understand this Yankees roster is just wildly flawed. You have between so many right-handed bats and just not good fielders, and the short porch and right, which was designed specifically for Babe Ruth, which they can't seem to figure out how to do. So I don't know what the deal is. I think that they just wait till the offseason to fix the whole team. That's the only way you can do this at this point.
Yeah, and I agree. And I'm not saying that, listen, these bats get hot and they might be able to turn it around. I'm not saying that's not impossible, but the truth is that it takes a lot of work, and they're not one or two buys away from making this a playoff team. It would take the whole roster to really get hot. And listen, is that possible? We've seen that from Aaron Judge. We've seen that from Gary Sanchez right now. DJ LeMahieu historically has been a great hitter. I mean, Gleyber Torres, if he finds it, he's a great hitter. But there are a lot of ifs in that statement. There are a lot of ifs about what this team could do. And I think that that's a big question mark for this team. And listen, it would take all those ifs to make them a playoff team, but it's not looking like that right now. And because of that, it's a thing where you'd have to wait till the offseason. And if it doesn't play out and you miss the playoffs, I don't see how Boone comes back to this clubhouse as the manager for next year.
I mean, he really shouldn't. You know, I'll be standing at the gates of Yankee Stadium myself and say, no, you're not welcome. I'll just stand there like this and say no.
Yeah, and I think the big problem with that is that really Aaron Boone is just a reflection of Brian Cashman's philosophy. I mean, he's there so Brian Cashman can institute his analytics the way he wants to manage his team, his players the way he wants to play them. So you really don't have an independent manager. I mean, I don't think Aaron Boone makes a majority of the calls on his own. And a guy like Joe Girardi might have done that. So I think that's a big problem. I'm not sure if you're going to get rid of Boone, you're probably going to get rid of Cashman too. I think the two are together. So do I see the move happening? I don't think so. But should it happen? I think they need to go. Boone needs to leave, and they need to find a manager that's going to develop these players and really get the most out of their potential, because that's not what we've seen from them. Now, before we end the segment, I want to get to the Mets. We touched on it with Sam. They're playing the Yankees this weekend, Subway Series, obviously, in the Bronx. They're only 41-36. Now, they have the same wins as the Yankees, which is kind of crazy to think about it. Obviously, they've played 3 less games. They're holding on to that first place in the NL East really barely. I mean, the Nationals have had a huge spark by Kyle Schwarber. He pulls the hamstring last night. His timetable for return unknown, but they really have jolted to the top of the standings, and they're threatening the Mets right now. You really got to be worried if you're the Mets. I mean, this lineup is a nothing lineup. The hot bats are really short list. It's James McCann who's been hitting really well, Pete Alonso, and Dominic Smith. After that, I mean, these bats are really cold. I mean, Sam mentioned it. And a guy like Brandon Nimmo, you really hope to come back, but it's really starting to get worrisome if you're in Queens, because this was a team you were really high on early in the year, and now you're starting to come back down to reality. And the playoff chances are looking a little more concerning. Even though you're first place in that division, it really doesn't feel like it. So that's got to be a really big concern for the Mets. And this Subway Series might be just as important for them as it is for the Yankees.
I wholeheartedly agree with what Sam said, what you just said, Mike. I think the Mets hanging by a thread, by a fingernail at the top of the NL East is a little concerning, especially with how bad their bats have been. Like you said, you know, the bats besides Smith, Pete, and McCann have been freezing cold. It's like swinging an ice stick around.
I mean, basically is.
Yeah, literally. No. And I'm sure it just is not sitting well with these players. I mean, we talked about Lindor, you know, he's playing better. The bat's starting to come around, but it can't just be a 213 hitter, especially with a player of his caliber. And we talked about Donaldson maybe coming in to help as a trade target, which we've seen a lot of, but the Mets really need to get the pitching, the back end especially, figured out, because while Stroman, Taijuan Walker, who's been an absolute steal of a signing for them, they've been great. And then, of course, you have the MVP. I'm going to say it now, Jacob deGrom. He is the MVP. There's no doubt about it. Outside of those three, that back end is pretty suspect. And I don't know, can they buy low on a Luis Castillo? He hasn't had the greatest of years. Do you ask him to kind of be that number 4 guy? I have no idea. Could you get someone like that? Is it something internal? Do you pull someone up from the minors? Maybe they come on and provide a spark. Do you throw Lugo into that back end to kind of be like a spot starter every 4th day? You could do something like that. So I don't know what the Mets could do. Honestly, for the pitching side of things, that is probably the most important thing in baseball, is having very good starting pitching. I don't know how many options they have. I mean, there's definitely people out there you can go and grab, but It's just a matter of what's the asking price going to be, and do they have a positive effect on this team? So we're going to have to wait and see for that one. I think the Mets are going to make a move. Who it's going to be for, I couldn't tell you even if I had a magic crystal ball, but I think they're going to definitely do something.
Yeah, they're definitely buyers at this deadline. I mean, they're first place in the NL East, and this seems like a year they've got to capitalize on the way DeGrom's pitching. And, I mean, the pitching, looks good. Stroman's been legit too. Taijuan Walker has regressed a little bit. 3.26 ERA in the month of June is not as good, but you're still taking that as a number 3 any day of the week. He's a 2.38 on the year. And, of course, you're going to take that production of your first 3 starters. And even the bullpen, Castro had a few bad outings, but he's good. May and Diaz, they're solid. You got some bullpen arms there. It's really this lineup you want to provide insurance for. You mentioned it to Sam, Josh Johnson, a guy like that. A power bat like him could be really useful for the Mets. That's the type of signing they need to go after. A consistent bat they can put in this lineup, potentially in the infield. Obviously, Nimmo, when he gets to center. The outfield looks like it's going to be filled up. If Conforto starts to hit, that outfield can be good. But I think you can strengthen this infield hitting-wise, and that's the type of move I would like to see out of the Mets. One more thing before we sign off and send it to a break. The Mets have a pretty friendly schedule left. They see the Yankees 3 times this weekend, who have not been good. They see the Brewers 3 times, who have been scorching hot. So that's going to be a tough series. But they end their games before the All-Star break with the Pirates 4 times. This is a very doable schedule for the Mets. If they can take 6 or 7 wins out of these last 10, that's going to be huge as they head into the All-Star break to give them some comfort room in those standings. So that's what the Mets have to focus on. Take it one game at a time. And if you can win 6 or 7 out of your last 10, that's really going to be helpful for you. Now, you go, Thomas.
Yeah, just really quickly, I say if they're going to be playing the Brewers, they're going to have a hard time because that 3-headed pitching monster of Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta, that gives teams fits. And I think for a cold lineup like the Mets, that's going to really give them fits. So they got to be on their A game for that series. That's the one that might be the make or break. Yeah,
it's definitely going to be a test for the Mets, and that's going to be the series that really defines them in these standings before the All-Star break. We're going to have a quick break. When we get back, we're going to see Bryan Hoch. We're going to interview him. We're going to talk all things Yankees, Boone, Cashman. What's the state of the team? That's going to be coming up after this break.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
101, joined now by Bryan Hoch. Bryan's a New York Yankees beat reporter for MLB.com. Bryan is also the author of 3 books, including his most recent release, The Bronx Zoom, Inside the New York Yankees' Most Bizarre Season. Bryan, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. Happy to be on with you guys. Thank you for having me.
I want to start with this Yankee team right now. They've seemingly struggled to remain consistent throughout this whole season. They're in the midst of a 4-game losing streak after getting swept by the Red Sox. What have you seen with this Yankee team that has led them to be so inconsistent?
Oh, you said it right there. Consistently inconsistent. That's the one thing we could say about this Yankee team. And this is a team that was supposed to be a powerhouse. A lot of us picked them to win the American League East, to go deep into the postseason, potentially bring home a 28th World Series championship. And this point just have not seen it. There are stretches where they seem to be putting it together. Their pitching carried them for a while, but really it hasn't seemed to sync up. And, if it was April or May, you might be able to say it's early, but they're coming up on the All-Star break here, and they've spent almost 81 games spinning their wheels. So if they are to be the team that we thought they were going to be, they're going to have to pick it up in a big way starting right now.
And to double down on that consistency idea, something that I think is really interesting is that it's almost like individuals have had their moments, but the teams never clicked together. You've had a run from Gary Sanchez. You have a run now from DJ LeMahieu. Why do you think it is that it's almost been like a group of individuals getting it going as opposed to one collective team clicking at the same time?
Yeah, you're right. And, Aaron Judge has been one of their best offensive players wire to wire here, but he couldn't do it all by himself. And I think they've had so many outages in the lineup where, if you look past like the 5th and 6th spots in the lineup, it has just been a dead zone and they're not getting production. And it's really hard to keep the line moving when you've got so many guys slumping at the same time. So yeah, 1 or 2 guys get hot, but they can't carry the team all by themselves. They need to play as a unit. That's the way this sport moves. And, solo home runs are just not going to get it done at the end of the day. And, they got a couple last night. Gio Urshela hit one and Giancarlo Stanton hit one. And guess what? They lost the game. So, you got to get that traffic on the base fast. You got to get guys really putting together consistent at bats. And then, once in a while you can play for that 3-run homer.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things with this team has been like the sense of complacency that's been noted by fans and the media with maybe losing or just not showing up to the ballpark every day to play. Has that been something you've noticed being at every game this season, or is this team look like they're continually trying to reverse that narrative?
I think they're trying. I think they're banging their heads against the wall, trying to do whatever. It's not a lack of effort. I don't see that. I think that there is frustration for sure. There's disappointment because, as I said, this is not a team that was coming in to say, give it the old college try and, we'll see what happens. This is a team that was built to win a World Series. Everybody was talking about championship caliber team and, coming off the disappointment of last year where the Yankees, frankly, thought they should have played better and should not have lost the division to Tampa Bay. They really wanted to come back and make a statement, and thus far, you just haven't seen it.
And I think that one of the most interesting things is, we're all in the press conferences and we all hear it. And the beginning of the season, there was a lot about patience, about the lineup's going to get it going as the year goes along. But now you hear a much different dialect from someone like Aaron Boone, who says the season's on the line now. Now the talk is cheap conversation. So where do you fall in that conversation about, it's time to get it going, it's almost too late versus it's patience, we're only a few games back, we've got a lot of the season left to play? Which side of that kind of mindset do you fall on when you look at the Yankees right now?
Those press conferences have been tough because I feel like Boone has pushed every button he possibly can at this point, and other than the panic button. And I mean, maybe by saying your season is on the line, maybe that is the panic button. And if your season is on the line in June and they don't turn it around, I asked him a variation of this question last night. It didn't work. You said your season's on the line and then your team went out and lost again. Now what do you do? What's left? Do you go in and flip the buffet table and scream and yell at guys? And is that going to turn it around? I think you've got a team of 26 professional guys here who obviously want to succeed. Nobody wants to go out and lose and to play the way they've played, but it's just not clicking. And I wonder if it's a chemistry issue or what. Or is it the hangover effect from last year's strange year? I guess that could be part of it, but there's a lot of teams around the majors who are doing just fine. So that tells me it's an internal problem with the Yankees, and something's not right and they've got to figure it out.
Bryan, would you say the answer would be to go out and get another star, potentially a guy like Ketel Marte or maybe a pitcher to add to that rotation, or should the Yankees potentially be sellers at this deadline that is continually to approach?
I'm not ready to say they're sellers yet. I mean, they are still 2 games above 500. They're in this race. They're 7.5 back in first place. They can get hot. I'm not ready to say the season is done. I think this team needs help, though. It's a flawed roster, and yeah, center fielder would be fantastic. They were planning on Aaron Hicks being their guy. He was going to be their 3-hitter. They're kind of rocking the lineup there, and he was bad, and then he disappeared with injury, and he's not coming back. And starting pitching, that was my big question mark coming into this year. I never thought the Yankees were going to struggle scoring runs the way they have. I thought they weren't going to be able to pitch enough. And, behind Garrett Cole, what was that rotation going to look like? And for a while, it looked all right. Corey Kluber threw a no-hitter, but he's not coming back for a while. Luis Severino was going to be their big trade deadline pickup, but that's been pushed back. So if I'm Brian Cashman, I need to go get a center fielder. I need a starting pitcher, and I need it right now.
You just mentioned that rotation, so let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because you're exactly what I was going to mention there is that, the beginning of the season, the rotation was carrying them, and you saw a lot of good stuff from Kluber and Herman and obviously Cole. But like now the tables are kind of leveling out a little bit with guys like Taillon and obviously the Kluber injury and Herman kind of calming down a bit. So my question for you is, when you get into the late season situation and you need wins and you hand these guys the ball and say, go out and get me a win, are you confident they can do that?
Confident in Garrett Cole, I think. Other than that, this is a team that I think is going to have to lean on their bullpen a lot if they're going to get where they need to go. Because, for example, last night you get a start from Michael King, and he was all right, but he didn't finish the fifth inning. And so you're going to have a lot of that, and it's going to tire out this bullpen. You're going to get a lot of miles on that because you're going to have to get it from other places. And that's what we thought even coming into the year. If you look at that rotation, Corey Kluber, Jameson Taillon, Domingo Herman, all combined for one inning in the major leagues last year. So you knew that there was going to be, even if they came out of the gates firing bullets, at some point they were going to taper off. And now Kluber may come back in September, they're saying. Herman seems to have cooled off, as you mentioned, and Taillon has been very inconsistent. So, yeah, the rotation actually has turned into what I thought it would be, and that's a problem for the Yankees because they need somebody to eat up some innings, and so that's why I say Brian Cashman needs to go trade for a starting pitcher.
You mentioned your confidence in Garrett Cole. Obviously, he did not look so great in his last start against the Red Sox, and he hasn't really looked great since the MLB has cracked down on the sticky substances. Is that something that should worry Yankee fans, or do you think this is something that he'll able to move past?
I think he's got the talent to move past it. I think he is still an elite pitcher in this league, but clearly he has lost a little something without the artificial help here. And look, I almost say it's unfair because he has become such a focal point and the poster boy for this crackdown, when I really believe 90% of the league was using something to, whether it was sunscreen or, rosin or whatever it is, to get a little tack on it. And we're seeing it league wide that I think offense is going to come back. And I think that some of the things that were making these guys unhittable will now be gone, and you're going to start to see more singles and doubles and guys moving around the bases, which is good for baseball. That's the game that I grew up loving. Nobody said, "Hey, I'm going to go to the ballpark and buy a ticket because I want to see a bunch of strikeouts and walks." Like that was not what we all signed up for here. So I think for the game, this is going to wind up being a good thing for a guy like Garrett Cole. He's going to have to figure out another way to get some outs. And, that Fenway spanking he took, look, maybe the Red Sox are just a good team and they got him on a good day. Maybe it was a bad day at the office. But every time he has one of those, you're going to look at it and say, that's interesting.
Yeah. And you talk about that Fenway smacking, and something that was really interesting to me about Fenway was there was a full house. And I think one of the things about Yankee Stadium that's been so strange to me is even after the COVID capacity changed, it's felt the same, really. I mean, we've never really eclipsed 30,000. It hasn't really been a full house, and maybe the Subway Series will change that. But what has been your impression of just the atmosphere, the game day atmosphere that really hasn't been there? And I know a lot of people use that word fun. It almost looks like there isn't any fun being had again. Why do you think that is, that just the fans aren't coming out as much as you might expect for the Yankees?
Well, I think part of it is the on-field product. I think that, look, if the Yankees went on that tear that I'm talking about that they need to get on, where they're winning 8 out of 10 or something like that, and they get hot and they look like they're having a good time, then people are going to want to come buy tickets, I think. I certainly hope so. But, yeah, no, I mean, being up there at Fenway Park, I was up there for that series. The place was packed, 3 straight games, and clearly there's excitement because it's the Yankees in town, and they had a big celebration of Dustin Pedroia. There were reasons to come out to Fenway, but that place felt alive, and I haven't quite felt that so far in Yankee Stadium. The best experience I've had at Yankee Stadium so far this year was the day the Astros came in, and that was a game where it was only about 10,000 in the stands, but it felt like 45 or 50. Like that felt like baseball was back, and that tells me that people want to come out and cheer. People want to be part of baseball, but they want to spend their money on a team that is worth it for the entertainment value. And nobody wants to come out, like I said, and watch the Yankees struggle.
There's been a lot of talk among fans and potentially in the media too about where does Boone's job and where does Brian Cashman's job right now? Do you consider them potentially being on the hot seat?
Yeah, I've been asked this a lot. And people say, is Boone on a hot seat? And I say he's on a warm seat. Yeah, I think that the Yankees have never made, in Brian Cashman's time, going back to 1998, they have never fired a manager in season. They've never fired a coach in season. Cashman said he has no intention of doing that now. So that tells me I think they're going to get the rest of this year to figure it out. But look at the history of how the Yankees have parted with their managers. Joe Torre, contract expired, they let him go. Joe Girardi, contract expired, they let him go. Aaron Boone's contract is up after this year. So if they don't make the playoffs, I think that that is definitely a real conversation they're going to have. You look back at Boone, he won 100 games back-to-back years, first couple of years. I think the pandemic year, you have to kind of throw that out. But this year here, if they sense that he's not the guy to motivate and drive this team to the next level, then they might have to make that change.
You talk about the playoffs, and the last thing I want to ask you about the season right now before we get into the book is a little bit about just the future outlook. When you talk about coming into the season, it was obviously a lot about World Series of Bust was really what a lot of people were saying, and now it's almost like making the playoffs might even be considered a win with the way things are going. So when you look at where we're at right now, has your expectations almost kind of downgraded a little bit to just the playoffs, or are you still kind of keeping that outlook that this could still be the team that we all expected coming into this season?
Well, look, you got to be in it to win it, right? That's step one, is you got to get into the postseason to have any chance to win in the World Series. So that is the critical mission right now for this team. They have disappointed. I mean, there's no way around it. Now, can they catch fire in the second half and make this kind of a great comeback story? Sure, I guess. I mean, Boone said that yesterday. He said baseball history is littered with teams that were in worse situations than we are right now. That's true, but baseball history, more often than not, is littered with teams that did not play very well and then did not make the playoffs. Like, that is much more common than the miracle comeback story. And so, look, it is in the Yankees' hands. They can play better and they can win some games and make some noise. But this American League East is so tough with Boston, with Tampa Bay, with Toronto, which is not going anywhere. They're in fourth place right now. I don't think the Yankees are a fourth place team, but, as Bill Parcells used to say, you are what your record says you are. And right now, that's where they are.
Brian, Alex mentioned about your new book. I do want to get to that before we let you go. The name of the book, The Bronx Zoom, Inside the New York Yankees' Most Bizarre Season. I just want to know what drove you to write this book. Obviously, it was a really weird year for a lot of people and a weird season for everyone in the MLB with no fans and only 60 games. But was there anything specifically that drove you to write this book?
Yeah, when baseball restarted in July, look, I was with the Yankees in spring training when things shut down, and there was so much uncertainty and misinformation. We had no idea what was going on. The players came off the field March 12. They told us opening day will be delayed by at least 2 weeks. And so I figured, 2 weeks, that's not so bad. And then you fast forward and it's July 23rd, and now you're finally getting the season started. And, probably in that first week where, if you remember, the Yankees were in a series, obviously COVID is raging. We don't have a vaccine at that time. Things are bad everywhere. New York City is the epicenter coming into this. And the Yankees have a series in Philadelphia where it's 3 beautiful days, sunny, 95 degrees, and they essentially get rained out 3 straight days because the Phillies had a COVID exposure with the Marlins, who had 18 positive tests in their clubhouse. And I remember thinking, man, if they can pull this season off, this is a miracle. Like, the fact that, what an achievement, even being 60 games, even no fans in the stands, if they can find a way to do this. And I thought that, look, I was with the Yankees every step of the way. It's a Yankee book, but it's a baseball book. But it's also a book about 2020 and all the things we went through in that season. And I was amazed at how much more than any other year I've been on the beat. I've been on the beat since 2007. Real life and baseball intersected in 2020. You were dealing with the pandemic. You were dealing with Black Lives Matter and the social justice movement. You were dealing with the presidential election of Trump versus Biden that everybody had an opinion on and nobody could look away from. And it all kept batting up against baseball and the Yankees. And it was just, wow, I can't believe how that much this keeps overlapping. And I thought there was a book there. And I wanted to tell the story of, how these human beings, not just the athletes, but a human story of how we all got through 2020. We all lived it together. We all have our story of the pandemic, but this is the Yankee story of it.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And one thing I wanted to ask you about across your books, and you've written multiple of them now, is, you talk about Mission 27, and that was kind of about that final season for the Core Four, another group of just individuals that had such a terrific accomplishment. And then you talk about, the Baby Bombers and the book that you wrote kind of previewing what was ahead for this Yankee team. And now you look at where we are in 2020, and that team hasn't necessarily broken through yet. I'm just curious for you, you mentioned you're on the beat since 2007. how this team kind of compares to some of the other ones that you've written about and you've watched over the years, and the 2020 season is a part of it. What's really unique about this team? Maybe either why they are where they are, or who they are, and just what do you think is special about it?
About the 2021 team, the
yeah,
current
specifically,
team
sure,
that we're watching. I think there's a lot of star power on this team, and that's one thing that the Yankees have always had is star power. You know, people care when the Yankees come into town. Traveling with the 09 Yankees, it was like being with the Beatles, like because Jeter and A-Rod and Posada and Andy Pettit and Mariano Rivera. You would go to a city, we'd go to Minneapolis or Boston or whatever, and there would be people packed 20 deep outside the hotel. It was like a rock band was coming to town. And I'm not sure the Yankees have that level here, but you've certainly got recognizable players with Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton and, you know, to a certain extent, DJ LeMahieu. I mean, Garrett Cole, of course. And you've got some of the biggest names in the game, and I think that's the parallel is the Yankees are built around stars. They're always recognizable. The brand is always there. But this year in particular, just the on-field performance has not matched up to what we all expected. And look, if you take the uniform away and the city away and you say this is the Kansas City Royals and they're 2 games over 500, they'd be thrilled. The Pirates, they'd be thrilled. The D-backs for sure would be thrilled with that performance. But these are the New York Yankees. We expect more out of them. And the spotlight burns brighter in New York. There's just no getting around that.
Yankees beat reporter for MLB.com. You can catch him on Twitter at Bryan Hoch. Be sure to check out his book, The Bronx Zoom, which is out now. Bryan, pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate you taking out your time of the day.
You got it, guys. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVsports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org.
Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. Alongside Mike Calamari and Thomas Aiello, I'm Mike Messina with the headlines. And guys, we're going to start off with some MLB All-Star Game snubs and surprises from this year. The starters have been selected and announced, and there is really no question that, for the most part, both teams are filled with the best talent from each side. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. makes history as he is the youngest player to ever lead the MLB in voting. Shohei Ohtani gets his first bid to the All-Star Game as a designated hitter, and I'm thinking that he may be pitching as well in the game. Again, for the American League, the Blue Jays take over the entire right side of the infield, and the Red Sox take over the entire left side of the infield, which is something I'm not sure if we've seen before, so that's kind of interesting. Over on the National League side, Fernando Tatis Jr. arguably the face of baseball, makes his first All-Star game appearance, which is kind of surprising to me because I feel like he's someone that we should have been seeing an All-Star game for years to come. Obviously, last year, due to the canceled All-Star game because of COVID, this is his first one. And on the National League side, there's only 3 players on the starting lineup who have more than 2 All-Star game appearances. So it's a pretty young team filled with a lot of young talent, and I'm excited to see what goes into that. And Mike, I'm going to start with you. Who were some of your All-Star snubs and some of your All-Star surprise that did or didn't make this team?
Yeah, I think the biggest snub for me is Michael Brantley. I mean, I don't know how you lead the MLB in batting average. He's hitting 345 this year, and he's not an all-star. I mean, there's 2 guys he could be in over. I think he can be over in Teoscar Hernandez, who's been okay. He's been good. He's been an all-star. But Michael Brantley has a better OPS than Hernandez. He obviously has a better average because he's leading the league in that. So I see no reason why Hernandez should be over Brantley. And then on the other scenario, there's Mike Trout, who's in the All-Star. Now, granted, Mike Trout's Mike Trout. He has 8 homers. He's hitting 333, but he's only played 36 games. So both those guys are starting in this outfield in the AL, and I don't see how Brantley is not in there. Leading league in batting average. And the other thing you have to consider is this is a historically down year for batting average. The average is around 245. And when the batting average is 245 and you're hitting 345, you're 100 points better than the league average. That is outstanding. So in my opinion, there's no reason why Michael Brantley shouldn't be an all-star. And I think a surprise, it's kind of obvious, but for everyone, it's been Shohei Ohtani. I mean, he hits another homer last night. He hits 3 in the Yankee series. He's been killing it at the plate. And on top of that, he's been pretty dominant on the mound. Now, heading into the Yankees start, he had a sub-3 ERA. Obviously, he lets up 7 runs in that first inning. But he's still a two-way player that we've never seen before. He has upwards of 27 home runs. I mean, this is the biggest surprise for me. And it's not a surprise he's an all-star, but it's a surprise he's playing this well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Mike. Shohei Ohtani is kind of the guy. He's the front runner for the AL MVP. He said DeGrom is the NL MVP right now, and Shohei's the AL MVP. So I'm not surprised that he's in it, but like you said, it's surprising that, he's kind of there. But I think I have 2 people for the American League. One of them is Cedric Mullins, and for obvious reasons. He's batting .317. He leads the American League in hits right now at 99. He's definitely going to crack 110 by the All-Star break. I think it's possible. And the other guy that I had, this one was kind of, I don't know, sort of kind of not really out of left field, but Matt Olson of the Oakland Athletics, who's been having a monster year for them. He's just mashing home runs left and right. Of course, that Gold Glove defense at first base, we know what he's capable of, both sides of the ball. I thought maybe, I understand you're not going to beat out Vlad, but, if we're going to pick anyone else, maybe Matt Olson is your other guy. And he's a good player. He plays in Oakland, unfortunately. You're not going to get as much press as you would in Toronto with, the name value of the city. Oakland's obviously not Toronto. So Matt Olson's my guy, and Cedric Mullins, I think we can all agree, is the obvious robbery for an injured Mike Trout. But again, it's Mike Trout. You can't overlook him like that.
Yeah, I'm with you for both of those, Mike. I also have Michael Brantley as a snub. I mean, as of now, he is the best left fielder in the American League. In my opinion, I do not see how Teoscar Hernandez, the 7th ranked left fielder according to Fangraphs, how he is a starter for this American League All-Star team when Michael Brantley is right in front of our faces and should be playing there. I mean, he's hitting 345, 387, 510 with an 897 OPS. I mean, the guy is flat out competing at a high level. And just to not see him being on the starting lineup is very disappointing because he's earned that starting spot on the team. He's earned that playing time. He's earned that position to be called an all-star again. And I mean, it's just unfortunate that he's not there. And a player like Teoscar Hernandez, who I'm not going to discredit his ability to play the game of baseball, also a very great left fielder, just is not having as good of a season as Michael Brantley is right now. And for him to be the starter, it doesn't really make sense to me. But I have to give it to everybody. The players that are on each team are pretty much the right players to be there. There's not that many snubs, in my opinion, or surprises that are on either side. But a big surprise for me, and I'm going to go the route of I'm surprised he's playing this well, is Buster Posey. Catcher for the San Francisco Giants, took 2020 off due to COVID-19, and it really helped rejuvenate his career. He's hitting 330 his slash lines at 330, 418, 560 with 12 home runs. And that's more home runs than he's had in 2018 and 2019 combined. He is pretty much the backbone of that team right now, and has been and will be going forward. Without Buster Posey behind the dish for them, I'm not sure if they're in this position that they are right now. And that kind of leads us into our next segment, which is the first team to win 50 games so far in the MLB, which is the San Francisco Giants. That's something not many people really expected this far. It's not something that I don't think any analysts or writers really expected either. People thought they would be last place in the NL West, and they're in first place in the NL West, which is arguably the best division in baseball. Half a game ahead of the Dodgers for first place. And right after them for 50 wins comes the Dodgers and then the Red Sox, two teams that were more likely to be in this scenario, in this position going into the All-Star break. Two teams with obviously great players and great chemistry around the team in general. Thomas, let me start with you. Is this sustainable for the Giants moving forward and past the All-Star break, or are they kind of going to start to fall off and be the team many people thought they would originally be?
I want to just say this before I make my point. Don't ever underestimate the power of old people, okay? As old and crippled they might be, and they can't maybe move as well as they used to, they still have the brains to outsmart pretty much any team they want, okay? This Giants team, I just want to read this off. They're 9 regular guys. They're 8 regular starters. Buster Posey's 34. Brandon Belt, who was hurt, he's 33. Donovan Solano, 33. Brandon Crawford, 34. Evan Longoria, 34, even though he's hurt right now. Steve Duger is the only guy under 30. He's 27, but like Mike Yastrzemski's 30, Alex Dickerson's 31. So you guys get the point. It's a team of old people. I think they can keep this up. It's a fun little story that the old guys are having one last hurrah. This is one last hoedown, I think. I don't know, after this year, those legs really might start to fall off the train. But, it's nice to see Buster Posey. We can agree, probably the greatest catcher of our time that we've seen, and one of our favorite players. No one really hates the guy. He's just such a class act, and he's been an MVP. He's done some winning, so knows a thing or two about rejuvenating a team and getting it to reverberate throughout the clubhouse. So I think they're going to keep it up for this year. I don't think the Giants are going away. Kevin Gausman, who's leading them in pitching, he's on 1.86 ERA, so he's just been unreal. And Alex Wood is a good supporting pitcher, I guess you can say. He hasn't been terrible. Tony Disco, Anthony Desclafani is also in that rotation. So I like the Giants. I think one last hoedown, one last hurrah for these guys, for the old guys. So I think they're going to keep it up. They're going to definitely challenge people in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting team, but I have major concerns whether they're going to be able to keep it up, given the division they're in. I mean, the NL West is no slouch, obviously, because the Dodgers are there and the Padres are there, 2 powerhouses. And you got to think those teams are going to make a play for the playoffs and probably be locks to get in. I would say the Giants are third, even though they're not really third, but in my own head, I would say them the third team in that division. I'm just a little concerned about this lineup a little bit. They're top 10 in strikeouts. They're striking out at a high percentage. Now they're scoring a lot of runs. They're hitting homers. They're hitting with runners in scoring position. You can win when you strike out, but it makes it harder to win when you strike out a lot. And that might show up later in the season. I think another reason that I'm concerned about this team is, although the rotation's been really, really good for this team, it's a lot of unproven commodities. Kevin Gausman, Desclafani, Alex Wood's been good throughout his career, but these aren't guys that usually have the ERAs he's got. Kevin Gausman's not a 1.68 ERA. Now, this year he is, but in years past, that's not who he's been. And listen, if they stay consistent and they keep playing the way they are playing, yes, this team can make a play in the playoffs. But the question is really, is that going to happen? And quite frankly, given the division they're in, I don't see that happening. The Dodgers and Padres are 2 big powerhouses for me. And with other teams in the NL starting to heat up, they could see themselves on the outside looking in if they don't keep this going. Now, Grant, they are one of the best records in the MLB, top of that division. Right now, they're looking like a surefire lock for the playoffs, but there's still a lot of games to be played. We're not even halfway through the season. So I have a little concern with this Giants team, and I need to see them do it for the 162 games before I make them a pick to maybe contend for this World Series.
Mike, I'm right there with you on that. I mean, the Dodgers and Padres, when you think about the NL West, you think, oh, they're first place, second place, vice versa. You don't think of really the San Francisco Giants as being in front of both the Dodgers and the Padres, especially a team that has two teams that have so much talent like they do. Let's move over to the Red Sox side of things, Mike. What do you think the Red Sox need to do going forward to stay in first place and keep this momentum they have going into the All-Star break?
Yeah, I think Chris Sale coming back for them is big. I mean, the Red Sox are 50-game team right now, like the Giants. And a lot of the reason they're winning games is timely hitting like the Giants. And they've got a great lineup. I mean, they have an MVP candidate in Xander Bogaerts. JD Martinez is a hot bat. Devers is a great bat. I mean, this is a team that's hitting. Vasquez, their catcher, good bat. They are getting hits in good positions with runners in scoring position. And their pitching's been just enough to get them by. It's not been great. Nathan Eovaldi is really their ace right now, and he's nothing to blow you away. Like, he's not an outstanding pitcher. He's not a normal team's ace, but he's doing the job to get them wins. He has 9 wins this year. So it's coming together for the Red Sox, and you got to be confident when you get a guy like Chris Sale back, hopefully soon at the top end of your rotation. If you work him up there by the playoffs, they're going to have a good enough rotation with Sale, with Eovaldi as a 2. And their lineup is one of the best in baseball. So the way they're playing, and in their division, they're winning games with the Blue Jays there. They haven't lost to the Yankees all year. I mean, the Rays, they're doing a good job at holding the Rays, who are a team that's tough to beat. This team is proving a lot to me, and I had a lot of doubts on this team, especially after that shortened season. So it's hard not to like the way they're playing, especially considering they're getting Sale back hopefully relatively soon.
I also agree with you, Mike. I think that their team, you kind of look at it outside of Bogaerts and Devers, you kind of just go, this team is blah, right? JD Martinez is a DH. He obviously doesn't play the field. So how much can he really contribute if he's in DH spot every night? And quite frankly, a lot. He's batting .305. But Xander Bogaerts and Rafael Devers, the way that those two have grown into leaders on this Boston team has just done wonders for them. And then you have guys like Alex Verdugo who are stepping up, Kike Hernandez, who has probably the coolest first name in baseball. He's playing pretty well. Hunter Renfroe was an absolute steal of an acquisition for them. He's been great. But I want to bring up their pitching, because I said this earlier in the show today, how important starting pitching is to have if you're going to win baseball games, let alone a World Series. Their starting rotation, Nick Pivetta, Nathan Eovaldi, Erod, Garrett Richards. I mean, these pitchers are probably like slightly above average at best. But Nathan Eovaldi, we can agree, has some serious guts. In 2018 in the World Series, he came back on short days rest. He was kind of lingering with a little injury, but he pitched that one game in LA and he pitched really well. And now they did lose to that game, and Muncy did hit a walk-off, but his teammates were congratulating him for just having the you-know-whats to go out there and pitch as well as he did. And I don't think Nathan Eovaldi, like, kind of coming out this good doesn't surprise me. And now I think at the trade deadline, they got to go maybe get one more arm. Maybe you can steal Zach Allen, maybe from the Diamondbacks as an example, maybe a kind of a buy low name from a team that is really struggling. He could help them out in the middle of that rotation. But like you said, Mike, Chris Sale coming back, that's going to do wonders for them. And I think the Red Sox have a legitimate chance to go to the ALCS. Like, they have the pieces to do it. They really do.
I think they can. And I think a big thing with this team too is the relative consistency throughout the whole lineup. I mean, this team has 7 guys hitting over 260. And this year, where the batting average is like 245 across the MLB, that is exceptional. And if they can continue that, the pitching will be able to be enough for them to win games. I have real big questions about the back end of the rotation, Garrett Richards, Nick Pivetta. I'm not sold at them at all. I don't think they've proven anything really to any Red Sox fans or the front office to say they're going to be consistent guys there. But when you get someone like Chris Sale back and he can leap to the front of the rotation, hopefully that's really a game changer. And if it's the Chris Sale of old, then he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. That has to be proven. But if you get someone like that, that's really game changing. And this team, like the Brewers, we mentioned that they are red hot. 7 straight, and they've scored 31 runs over this game. I mean, they are what I would think the Yankees were going to be coming into this year. They hit a lot. The pitching's not going to be great, but it's going to be enough to win you games. They've been that team in the AL East. So if they keep that up, I mean, they should really be the front runners in this division. I think the Rays are really solid, but there's nothing to say that the Red Sox can't win this division and have home field advantage in a first-round series in playoffs.
Yeah, and that's where you have to look at the lineup. Look, you have Xander Bogaerts hitting 324, Rafael Devers hitting 291, JD Martinez hitting 305, Alex Verdugo hitting 278, which seems low, but the Red Sox really haven't missed Mookie Betts too much up until this point with Alex Verdugo taking over his spot. And then go down to the pitching rotation. I mean, Mike, you mentioned you're not so caught up on Garrett Richards and Martin Perez, but how about Eduardo Rodriguez, man? I mean, he's 6-4 with a 5.42 ERA. Is that someone that you kind of want to be that number 3 man in your rotation behind Nathan Eovaldi and Nick Pivetta? I mean, they need that pitching. They need Chris Sale back if they want to sustain this, but you guys both said it. The Boston Red Sox have a great chance with this roster they have and the consistent hitting and the red hot bats and pitching that they have at the moment to become champions of the American League, go to the ALCS and have a chance at the World Series. So we'll have to see what happens in that route, but let's move on to another headline, a little more unfortunate news here. Trevor Bauer was placed on a 7-day administrative leave yesterday in wake of sexual assault allegations that were made of him. He is accused of sexually assaulting a woman at his home in Pasadena, California, which photos show a woman with black eyes and other injuries also, which Bauer denies on all accounts. He put out a statement through his agent, Rachel Luba, denying all accusations and everything that happened. The Dodgers had planned to have Trevor Bauer make his next start until they were told otherwise by the leagues. Dave Robertson said it was out of their hands. Thomas, how do you think the league handled this situation with Trevor Bauer? Should Bauer be out for longer than 7-day administrative leave, or what is your opinion on this? Because I know from the mind of fans and just people in the world that know what's going on, there's not many people who are really happy with how the MLB handled it and what Trevor Bauer got, and really just Trevor Bauer in general, because he's such an outspoken guy. And now for this to come kind of backfire on him and for him to be in the bad spotlight now, what do you think should happen, and how do you think the MLB handled this situation with him?
I couldn't tell you what should happen because that ultimately should be up to the baseball office of Rob Manfred and that whole crew. I mean, now we know that Rob Manfred's not the greatest decision maker in the world, and we don't know how he's going to handle it. But Trevor Bauer, I want to say, first of all, he is a creep for this. Like, this is just really creepy. It just kind of goes to show you don't really know people until they do stuff like this, and then it says a lot about a person. But Trevor Bauer, we know, is a raging hothead at times when he wants to be. He kind of just makes fun of the MLB, makes fun of other players. We know he has the documented beef with Garrett Cole, and people don't really seem to like the guy. And I don't know, everything he does just makes you a little uncomfortable, right? You're shaking in your boots a little bit. But I don't know, baseball kind of really did all that they could, putting him on, I thought 7-day administrative leave was a little, not a little, but wasn't enough. I thought maybe throw him on maybe a month hiatus. That maybe would have done things better, but they handled it as well as they could. This is just like a backhand to the face. You really don't know how to prepare for it. And to credit to baseball, they really did what they could. But Trevor Bauer is a creep. This is just now, like, this is a whole new level of who he is as a human being. And if I was the Dodgers, I would cut this guy immediately. Like, I don't want him anywhere near the clubhouse. I don't want him going to events. I don't want him near events with women and like little kids. Like, it would just be a very awkward thing for the Dodgers to have Trevor Bauer just lurking around doing stuff. So baseball handled it and the Dodgers handled it as best as they could. But I mean, I don't really know where they go from here. If it was up to me, I would sit him out all of next season and the rest of this season, but we're going to see.
Yeah, I think it's a very messy situation. I think the MLB is doing their best to buy time. It's definitely not good for this Dodgers clubhouse right now. I mean, you lose one of your key starting pitchers that you spent a lot of money off in the offseason. But besides that, I mean, Trevor Bauer has been trying to make a name for himself and set a brand that he's the face of baseball. And when allegations and news like this comes out against you, especially with corroborated allegations that seem to have very real substance and truth behind them, this is not good for what you're trying to build around yourself. And it's definitely not good for baseball, because when someone's marketing themselves as the face of baseball or trying to, and then these allegations come out, that does not bode well for your sport, and obviously does not bode well for Trevor Bauer. So it's a very messy situation, and there's a lot to it. I really think the MLB was just trying to buy themselves time. They're trying to figure out what to do with Trevor Bauer. I think this 7-day administrative leave is just really a little buying time until you figure out what kind of suspension or punishment you're going to put on him. And listen, Bauer might be potentially facing legal action based on the stories we've read. So there's a lot of moving parts with this, and the 7-day administrative leave most likely will be extended. I'd like to believe that, but until that happens, it's really just a waiting game to see how these sides play out and what happens with the situation.
Mike, we got Thomas's opinion on this. If you were in the Dodgers front office, what do you do with Trevor Bauer? Do you cut him? Do you wait until more information comes out about the topic, or do you cut him right here no matter what else comes out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's tough to just cut him right away. I mean, obviously, the Ray Rice situation in Baltimore, they did a very similar thing, but from what this story seems like, there's a lot more moving parts and it's really messy. If I'm the Dodgers, I at least wait out the end of this administrative leave. I mean, he was supposed to pitch Sunday night until this came out. So I would wait at least till the end of the 7-day administrative leave. And if it looks like the situation's getting worse, I don't see how you can have a guy like that around your team, especially when you're trying to win a World Series. To have that talked about in the clubhouse, to have that be a teammate of yours, obviously it's he's going through a lot, but these allegations are serious and they need to be dealt with, and the MLB needs to do their punishment, and the Dodgers also need to do what's best for their team. And if it's not dealing with a guy like this, I think that's probably the biggest next step that need to move forward, because the MLB is obviously going to take their time when they make the punishment on him, but the Dodgers need to do what's best for them right now. I think it's going to be really important to see what happens, but we're going to have to wait, and we'll be able to talk about it as the story develops. We're going to head to a quick break in just a minute. When we get back, we're going to talk NBA. Suns are heading to the finals. Me and Thomas are going to give you our reaction to the end of that series. Be right back.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back to One-on-One. Michael Calamari here with Thomas Aiello, Alex Wolves on all the production behind the boards. I want to get to some basketball talk. We're in the midst of an NBA Finals approaching. The Suns are the first team to get to the finals. They beat the Clippers in a Game 6 in Los Angeles. So big win for them. And there's a lot to talk about this team. It's CP3's first finals appearance. They take down a Kawhi-less Clippers, but it's still impressive. And Thomas, I just want to get your reaction off the top.
Well, first of all, congratulations to Chris Paul to reaching his first ever NBA Finals, and the Suns making it there for the fourth time since 1993. So congratulations to the Suns organization. But Mike, these Eastern Conference teams they're a little too good, I think, for the Suns. Okay. I want to start with the Hawks really quickly, because if they play either of these teams, I don't see the Suns winning. The Hawks are just such a deep team with all the talent that they have between Gallinari, Bogdanovich, Lou Williams. You have Capella down in the paint, someone who can actually match up with DeAndre Ayton. And then on the Bucks side of things, you've got Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday, who played out of their minds in Game 5. Brooke Lopez, who apparently turned into Shaquille O'Neal in that Game 5. And Giannis is on ice. We don't know if he's going to come back, but the Phoenix Suns, as nice of a season as it's been for them, I don't know if they're going to beat an Eastern team. I feel like the Eastern teams are too big. They're too physical, and they just play an incredibly hard-nosed brand of basketball that is a lot of shooting, a lot of physical defense, a lot of passing and running. And Phoenix, with Chris Paul, it's great to have a player like him. 41 points in that closeout Game 6. DeAndre Ayton had 16 and 17 rebounds. He's been phenomenal in the playoffs. And Devin Booker, who really didn't do much of anything. He had 22 in that Game 6, but the Suns have had a season nothing short of a successful one. They put together a roster that the pieces really complemented them well. Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder, of course, your wing defenders, who they just seamlessly fit into that Suns system. Booker and Paul on the perimeter doing all the dribbling and shot creating, and then DeAndre Ayton just basically owning the paint on both ends of the floor. And people say that he wasn't worth the first overall pick in that draft. I wholeheartedly disagree. DeAndre Ayton has been everything as advertised, okay? He was getting compared to David Robinson, the great admiral who played for the Spurs. Now, I don't know if he's an exact clone of him, but I'd say he's gotten pretty damn close. He's putting up 16 and 17. He had a 20 and 20 game a couple times in the playoffs. So it's not like he's been a bust of a first overall pick. If anything, he's been a great first overall pick. But they did beat a Clippers team that was shorthanded. They were a story that we thought they'd win the whole thing, but Kawhi goes down, and myself included, I'm guilty of this. I wrote them off in the Jazz series once Leonard was hurt, but then they show up to the West Finals, their first time ever as a franchise, and they pushed the Suns. They pushed them around a little bit more than we would thought they would, but it was a good series. But unfortunately, the Suns are not going to beat either of the teams that come out of the East.
Yeah, I don't agree. I think the Suns are the clear favorites in the team to beat. I'm not really sure what you've seen with the Bucks that have really impressed you. I think they've had a lot of letdown games where the Hawks really roll over them. I mean, you talk about Game 3. I mean, the Hawks seemingly had a lead almost throughout the entire game. So it's hard for me to believe that the Hawks really have a chance and to beat the Suns team. And I really don't think the Bucks either too. But I want to highlight what makes this Suns team so good. Devin Booker is a consistent scorer, playmaker. He's the lead guy in this team. He'll get you a bucket at any time. He's averaged 25 minimum in each of these playoff series thus far. He averaged 29 against the Lakers, then 25 consecutively in the Nuggets and the Clippers series. That's what makes him special. He can score at will. And then CP3, his ability to step up in the big moments. If Chris Paul wanted to, I think he could score 30 a game. I really do. But it's his ability to get the offense going, get guys involved. And then if it's a closeout game and he can take over at the end of the game, he does that. 41 points to close out the Clippers. He did it also in the Nuggets series in Game 4. He dropped over 30 points. So he does this time and time again. And you need a closure like that. Now, Trae Young is on the Hawks. He's obviously one of their closers. On the Bucks, they've got Chris Middleton, their closer. But I'm taking the team with two bona fide closers, Devin Booker and Chris Paul. I'm taking that team to win 10 times out of 10. And you talked about DeAndre Ayton, his comparisons to David Robinson. I'm not sure if I agree with those, obviously. But I mean, he stepped up. He in the conference finals, 18 points, 14 rebounds per game. His worst field goal percentage in a single game was 50% in game 3 versus Denver. I mean, he's efficient as they come. He never averaged under 50% in a game this playoffs. I mean, that really shows you a lot about what he brings to the table. And adding to that, these Suns have a lot of these other pieces, Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges, that add so much. I mean, Jay Crowder was in the finals last year in the bubble with the Heat. He's back with the Suns now. I mean, these are guys that are proven commodities. Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton young, but they've stepped up and they've not really showed any times where they've struggled in these playoffs. And I've seen that with the Bucks. I've seen them struggle, get rolled over by the Nets, the Hawks, and not really proven to me anything where, you know what, they have a chance against the Suns. And same with the Hawks. I think the Hawks are really good, but they are way too young of a team to take down the Suns. I really don't believe they're going to have it in them. So for me, that's why I think the Suns are really the favorites to win this.
I mean, I disagree with you. And producer Alex knows I've been writing on my Atlanta Hawks will win the NBA Finals take for a while. I'm not going to explain myself all the way because when I do that, I know that my take just fails. But the Atlanta Hawks, the reason why I chose them is because of the amount of depth and the amount of people that can go off of the dribble that they have. And I listed some of those names. And it's so hard to guard that. I mean, we saw that in the Knicks series. As a Knicks supporter I am, and I've seen them for a long time. You know, you can't beat teams that just have a plethora of skill players. We saw with the Nets. Now the Nets got killed by injuries a little bit, but the Bucks did win. And in round 2 for the Hawks, you know, they were dealing with a really tough team in that second round. Who I actually forget who it was because I'm just so focused on their conference finals and can they make the NBA finals. It's just so in my brain. I've forgotten who they played in the second round, but Philadelphia, that was who they played. But like I said, Philadelphia was having a hard time dealing with them on the perimeter. Ben Simmons, we know he was just selling himself to basically NBA hell and purgatory. He just doesn't want to play basketball at this point. The Hawks were kind of running circles in that game 7. Kevin Huerter has stepped up in a big way for them. He's been huge. I think they're going to win the game 6. But to your point about the Suns, the proven commodities, other than Chris Paul and Jay Crowder, I think all the young guys, this is their first real prove it kind of thing. I mean, you talked about the bubble. I kind of avoid the bubble. I really think it was fake news. I didn't think anything in there was legit. We were deceived by players who we thought were actually good. They come back to the normal.
I'm not sure how much deception there is. I mean, the Suns go 8-0 in the bubble and they're in the finals this year. I mean, that
was a completely different team though. See, that was a completely different constructed team. In real life, that team wouldn't make the playoffs. How they were then. They are now, yeah.
The only real addition to that, I mean, it's CP3 you're adding to that team, but I mean, the core is still there. I mean, Devin Booker's still there. I mean, DeAndre Ayton's still there. Mikal Bridges. I mean, you add Jay Crowder, you add Chris Paul, but I mean, you still have 90% of that team that rolls over into 2021. And that's what I don't think that you can just eliminate what you saw in the bubble. I think a lot of things that you saw in the bubble hold true to this playoffs. I mean, you talk about the Sixers falling short again, Clippers falling short again, Jazz falling short again. I mean, these happen again in 2021. They happened in the bubble. They happen again in 2021. The Suns, the team that would look the best in the bubble, they're in the finals right now. So to completely disregard the bubble, I think is a big statement. The Heat were a different team in the bubble. Probably they had a lot of young guys. They were rested easily and they could play the back-to-backs really well. But I don't think the Hawks team was as close as they were in 2021. They've developed a lot in a year. I think the Bucks go out and get Drew Holiday, and that's why they're better than they were in the bubble. So I think you could still use the bubble to tell you something, especially about the Suns, because they've proven that in every playoff situation, they've succeeded. They go to the playoffs in the bubble in 2020. They go 8-0. They don't make the playoffs. But in the regular season games down in Florida, they go 8-0. They come back to this season. They're at the top of the Western Conference throughout the whole year. They don't even see a Game 7 in the playoffs. They go 4-1 against the Lakers. They sweep the Nuggets, and then they beat the Clippers in Game 6. I mean, this is a Suns team that is really – they faced adversity, but in every time they've overcome it. So I don't see them really being challenged that much by a team on the other side, maybe the way you do.
I want to say, like, overcome adversity to an extent, you're correct, but there also is a little bit of luck involved. Now, I'm not discrediting the Suns for getting to where they are. I mean, I still think it's very impressive the way they just turned it around like that. But in round one, you're facing Anthony Davis, who essentially is glass at this point. LeBron James was playing hurt. You got lucky with KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, just not really playing that well. Andre Drummond, we know, Mike, he's not a good basketball player.
I know him from his time in Cleveland. He was, he can rebound, but that's about it.
That he really can't do anything else. So, I mean, they got lucky with that a little bit. I mean, Denver, without Jamal Murray, it was going to be hard for them to win. I thought maybe if Murray was there, at least the series might go 5 or 6 at worst case in Denver's scenario. But in the Clippers thing without Kawhi, I mean, I applaud the Clippers for putting up a good fight, but they had no chance. I'm sorry. They really didn't have a chance without Leonard. Ty Lue played the matchups. He used what he could. And I've given him a lot of garbage for being a not good coach for the puppet of LeBron James and his marionette kind of puppet show. But Ty Lue is actually a much better coach than what we were presented with in Cleveland. He understands how to utilize underused and overlooked talent. I thought he really demonstrated that well. And he's a champion. He's a champion for a reason. So now you kind of see it, but they really had no chance. And that Suns team was way better. And we all knew they were way better. So it was a good run, but I mean, there's a little luck involved. So I don't want to really overlook that.
Yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I have to disagree. I mean, you talk about the Lakers. Anytime you beat the defending champion, I don't care who they've got. That's impressive, especially when you beat them the way they did. They went 3 straight to close out that series, 3 straight after being down 2-1. So for me, that is very impressive. I know Anthony Davis not there. He was suffering injuries. LeBron James, obviously not 100%, but he's still LeBron James. So beating him when he's a defending champion, impressive. You go to Denver, you sweep the Nuggets. Yes, they don't have Jamal Murray, but you beat them convincingly. It's not like you see 7 games against a Jamal Murray-less Nuggets. You sweep them. And then you talk about this Clippers series. I mean, first 2 games, there's no Chris Paul. He's out for COVID protocol. So that's the perfect time to really measure the Suns team. No Kawhi for Clippers, no CP3 for Suns. What do the Suns do? They go up 2-0. So, I mean, that's what I'm looking at is where they've really shut down every single team. Yes, they didn't have their players, but that's not the Suns' fault. It's not the Suns' fault Anthony Davis was hurt. It's not the Suns' fault Kawhi wasn't there. It's not the Suns' fault Jamal Murray wasn't there. But every single time they've handled their business. So that's why I think that they're going to beat the Bucks. I mean, talk about the Bucks. They had 7 games to beat the Nets. I mean, there's no Kyrie Irving for a majority of that season. James Harden is basically playing on one leg, and Joe Harris can't hit a 3-point shot for a majority of that series. And they barely walk away with the win in Game 7 when Kevin Durant is unconscious and sends it into OT. I mean, Kevin Durant was great that series, but looking at that Nets roster that was playing against the Bucks in that series, the Bucks should not have had a problem with them. And they did. And listen, I was on the Bucks all playoffs, but from what I've seen of them leading up into this Eastern Conference Finals, I'm not confident that they can really challenge the Suns. And listen, if the Hawks are the team that the Suns face, I don't think a team that young with that little playoff experience is really going to prove a problem for the Suns team. I really don't. So, I mean, I think the Suns are the clear favorites, and I see them getting it done really in 6 games. Now, I want to move on from the Suns talk and focus really on CP3 here, because there's a lot of talk now about where does a guy like that rank in the all-time point guards? I mean, without comparing him to any sort of player, Thomas, I just want to say, let's say the Suns go out and win this finals. Where does CP3 rank all-time for you? Is he a top 5 point guard? Is he just a really, really good point guard? How do you feel about this?
I think it's hard to rank him without having him play in the finals first, but I'll do the hypothetical with you. I think if he does win this ring, he's definitely not going to jump Magic. I don't think he jumps Steph. He probably not jumps Isaiah Thomas, the original one. I mean, I think it's kind of close, but maybe he could jump him. He definitely is going to jump Stockton if he gets this ring. That's without question. He jumps Stockton. He's definitely better than Steve Nash, Jason Kidd. Like, you can say he's better than those guys. I think that's a safe statement to make. But Chris Paul is one of the greatest point guards that we've ever seen. He's easily the greatest point guard of our time. At least you and I, we're obviously not elder statesmen. We're on the younger side, but of our time, Chris Paul has definitely been the guy. And behind him, it's been Westbrook. Curry really just showed up out of nowhere, I thought, in that 2014-15 season. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think Chris Paul is going to pass those four guys. He's definitely going to jump Stockton if he gets the ring. But Chris Paul is a great point guard. The way that he's able to lead, the way that he makes guys better, the way that he takes matters in his own hands. I think that's the most important attribute that a player could have in NBA basketball, is being able to grab the game by the horns, grab the bull by the horns and say, I'm riding this right now. I'm going to deal with this. Like, I'll do it myself if I have to. I think that's the most important part of an NBA player. I'm the biggest Michael Jordan fan you will ever meet. Okay. He's better than LeBron James. Sorry, Mike, but it's true. Michael Jordan would take over games half asleep, literally. Like, he could be half asleep and still give you 40. He could be at full power and drop 90 if he wanted to. I'm sure that he'd average like 50 a game in today's NBA with the way you can't touch people, but we'll talk about that another day. But the killer mentality is just it's so imperative to a basketball player. We see so many guys just crinkle like nobody's business and crack under pressure. DeMar DeRozan, who has been accused of that. LeBron James, although he's been clutch, there are some moments where you could say he's had hiccups. Kevin Durant has had some blunders in the past, with 2016 in Golden State, this year with the air ball and his foot on the line. I don't know how much you can attribute the foot on the line, really, but still an incredible shot. But he's been accused of that. James Harden, we know, cannot perform in the playoffs like at all. It's known, but Chris Paul has proven that he can kill you in the playoffs. He can kill any team that he wants. He can annihilate any defense. And I think that puts him in that top four. How does it not? And I think with that ring, that'll only solidify that argument.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points. I really agree. I think Chris Paul has been really dominating these playoffs. Now, he's been in situations, I mean, he's blown 3-1 leads. He's been in situations, especially with the Clippers, where he's fell short. But I think it's hard to put a lot of the blame on him. And then you also think back to his Rockets days. I mean, that Golden State series, they're up 3-2, and he goes down with the injury, and that really puts a dent in the series. He doesn't play Game 7, and they lose. So who knows what happens when Chris Paul's healthy in that series. His playoff resume really is not great when you look at it like that way, but he's dealt with injuries, and he's in the finals now, which what matters to me. And I think even looking at it right now, let's say Chris Paul doesn't win the NBA finals. He loses, let's say for the Bucks, for example. I think even then we can look at what he's done, taking this team to the finals after missing it the previous year, as one of his biggest accomplishments. I mean, I'm looking at the all-time point guard list right now. I mean, Magic Johnson's got to be up there, Steph Curry, in my opinion, and then probably Oscar Robertson are three top point guards. And then it's hard not to put Chris Paul 4 right there. John Stockton's in that argument for sure. Clyde Frazier is in there. But I think if Chris Paul gets a ring, he separates himself from some of those guys, especially Stockton and Nash. And he's right up there with them. I mean, from what I've seen of him, his ability to create, get guys involved, score if you want to. I mean, it seems like he was hitting every mid-range jump shot in that Game 6, every single one. And he turns it on when he wants to. He was a menace in that fourth quarter. It's hard not to like CP3 and think of him as an all-time point guard. It's really not.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the greatest part about Chris Paul, now I did say the killer mentality, is how smart he is. He honestly might be the smartest basketball player of all time. There's a legitimate argument that you can make for that. And I'll give you an example. Remember last year in Oklahoma City when he was on the Thunder and he got the player called out for a tech because he had the jersey untucked? Mm-hmm. Only Chris Paul would know that, okay? When you read the rule book and you really study it, you can get away with things like that. He's just such an incredibly smart player. And the only real blunder I can think of, I mean, obviously the 3-1 lead, but like you said, the injuries and then the Rockets thing with the 28 missed threes and him just not being there, that was all-time levels of bad, and that's not Chris Paul's fault at all. The only real blunder I can think of was when he was playing Oklahoma City on the Clippers. This is 2000 and I believe 13 or 2012. It was around that time. And he had the worst minute, I think, ever. He missed a bunch of floaters. He turned the ball over. He got pickpocketed by bench phenomenon Reggie Jackson at the time. Kevin Durant then hit a crazy pair of jump shots to close the gap to like 5 points. And then CP3 was just missing shots. He was turning the ball over, which he never does. He averages under 2 turnovers, like close to one
zero turnovers in game 6. Yeah.
Right. But he usually doesn't lose the damn thing. And that's the only blunder I can think of where he just lost it all. But Chris Paul is a maestro. And, you can't discredit anything he's done. But I think winning the ring will really push him top 4 in that top 3 discussion. Now, I did forget Oscar, but I think we can say he's better than Oscar at this point.
I'm not sure about that. That might be a discussion for another day, but
it might be. Totally different NBAs, but I don't know. Statistically, Oscar wins, but if we're looking at player to player, there's a case there for Paul.
And I think it's really interesting. I mean, the only really bad thing you could point to CP3 is like a minute in 2013 NBA playoffs where he's really underperformed. And that's just to attest to the greatness and the consistency he's had throughout his NBA career. Obviously, the final appearances aren't there, but he's still an all-time great point guard. And it's going to be fun to rank him after we watch these finals play out. But that's going to do it really for our NBA talk. We're going to head to the ice after this short break. We're going to be joined back by Mike Messina. We're going to talk all things Stanley Cup finals right after this break.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Welcome back to One on One. I'm Michael Calamari, Thomas Ayala with me, Mike Messina joining us. We're going to talk Stanley Cup Finals. Lightning, they're up 3-0. They win last night 6-3. It looks like the Canadians have really not put up much of a fight. Obviously, they're trying to get a lead here, but the Lightning have been too powerful and too dominant thus far. Mike, I just want to get your reaction on what you've seen so far in this series. Has been a surprise to you? Were you expecting more out of the Canadians? What's been the biggest thing that stood out to you?
So there really isn't much that's been a surprise, honestly. I never personally expected the Canadians to even be in this position in the Stanley Cup Finals to be facing a team as good and talented as the Lightning. Looking at the stats, the Tampa Bay Lightning lead in pretty much every stat for the playoffs. Points. They have the most points out of any other team in all, for the top five. Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, Steven Stamkos, Victor Hedman, and Alex Killorn, all on the Tampa Bay Lightning, are the top 5 leaders in points. For goals, the top 3, Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos, they all lead the playoffs in that. Plus minus, Ryan McDonough and Eric Chernak, both on the Lightning. Wins, Andrei Vasilevsky. Save percentage, Andrei Vasilevsky. And the only thing the Tampa Bay Lightning do not lead in is goals against average, and Andrei Vasilevsky is second. So, I mean, it's not really a fair matchup here to be a Montreal Canadian. I mean, They came into this having a great series against Vegas, which not many people expected them to come out of in the first place. And to walk right from one powerhouse of the Vegas Golden Knights, walking directly into another, the defending Stanley Cup champions, Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, I'm not surprised in the least bit to see this series be 3-0. I mean, I might have expected them to take the first one in Montreal, but you have to think that they're really at a disadvantage because they're going from Tampa Bay, who I'm not sure how many fans that arena holds, but they have a full house there. They're going to Montreal, and they're only allowed 3,500 fans for a Stanley Cup final game. That is such a disadvantage in all sports, especially hockey, because that noise from the crowd and that's what gets those players hyped up. And to only have 3,500 fans and you're in your first Stanley Cup Finals appearance since 1993, it's disappointing. And you have to think, well, if there was more fans and more people in the arena in general just cheering it and outside noise, would it be 3-0? I don't know, but I'm not surprised at how the series has went these 3 first games. And I'm not going to be surprised if Tampa Bay takes Game 4 in Montreal too to sweep the Stanley Cup Finals. I'm really not going to be surprised about it.
Yeah, I think, Mike, you make a lot of great points. When you talked about Montreal and the lack of fans there, they made an effort with the city. They tried to get up to 10,000 fans for the playoffs and got rejected. I think they're at 3,500 fans in Game 3, probably the same thing in Game 4. That's a big difference. And if you're a Canadian fan, this is the first time since 1993, when you last won the Stanley Cup, that you're really teams in it competing. So this means a lot to all those fans there. And it's really detrimental that they're down 3-0 and they don't have the fans really to support them. But I don't think that should take away from the job Tampa's done. I mean, they've put so much pressure on this Montreal team. They've dominated offensive opportunities. And really anything Canadians getting going is stopped by Vasilevsky. He's been the player of almost every game in this series, stopping any chance the Canadians have. And the Canadians only really one opportunity was probably Game 2 to steal that game. I mean, they looked like the better team for a short period in that game. Obviously, a buzzer beater by Blake Coleman at the end of the second period. That hurt them heading into the third. It was tied 1-1 going into there, but they still looked really good. I mean, Nick Suzuki looked like the best player on the ice in Game 2. And he finished the game with 9 shots, 6 scoring chances, and 4 high danger looks. He ended with 1 goal. But when you have a guy playing that well and you still only producing 1 goal, and Tampa Bay scores 3, they beat you 3-1. That really has got to kill the Montreal Canadiens. And obviously, Game 3, the Lightning dominated. They scored 2 goals in the first 4 minutes. Vasilevsky, 32 saves. He looked outstanding. I mean, the Lightning are really making Carey Price, who's been so good in these playoffs, look basically like an average goaltender. That's what they're making him look like. I mean, they've outscored Montreal 14-5. And Lightning have not trailed a single game in this entire series. So it's really been dominated by one team, and that team is Tampa Bay. And if I had to say, I think this is going to end in 4, and unless the Canadians can find a way to turn this around and get some sort of confidence boost, the Lightning are going to be Stanley Cup final champions Monday night.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Back to the fans. They have, I'm going to be guessing on a number here. They have roughly 5,000 to 10,000 fans standing directly outside of the Bell Center, going crazy when Montreal.
Electric, crazy, yeah.
Going crazy when the Canadians score. So for them to not be able to go inside the Bell Center and watch the game, they have to be outside in a huge crowd, no matter where you're inside or outside. I mean, I feel like it kind of defeats the purpose of this whole only 3,500 fans allowed. But that's beyond the point. We obviously have no control over that. I just think if those fans were allowed inside that arena, it could possibly be a different story right now. They could get their energy, they can get some motivation to really skate faster and get shots on net. But you said it, Mike. Game 2 was Montreal's best game by far. They honestly should have won that game, but they can't get anything past Andrei Vasilevsky. I mean, he has 42 saves. He's the favorite for the Conn Smythe by far. Very physical game in games 1 and 2. Games 1 had 58 hits for the Canadiens and 57 hits for Tampa Bay. And that's something you really don't see that much in the regular season, no less the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, that is a ton of hits. But Cole Caulfield has 1 point in the Stanley Cup Finals so far, and that was last night. He had an assist. And they need him to start taking more chances. I know he shoots the puck a good amount, but he needs to take better shots and shots that he has better looks at, not terrible angles like some shots he does, passing the puck back to Suzuki and whatnot. So they really have to get Caulfield going. And you pointed out Carey Price. Without Carey Price, this team
it's not even close. Yeah,
this team is out 2 rounds ago. They never even come close. I mean, I had the finals to be Colorado Avalanche versus Tampa Bay. So I was half right, but to think Carey Price carried the Montreal Canadiens through the entire playoffs and swept Winnipeg and into the Stanley Cup Finals, man. It's a miracle. And Carey Price isn't really playing that well in the finals right now, but you can't put all the blame on him. I mean, his defense is not performing. Tampa Bay Lightning is just going through their zone and not taking no for an answer. They're getting rebounds. Last night, Tyler Johnson goes right through their defense, shoots the puck, gets his own rebound, scores. I mean, you can't be giving up those rebounds if you're Carey Price. I mean, I know that one hurt. Game 2, the buzzer beater from I forget who it was. The diving play. Yeah, Coleman, the diving play. That's the second time he's done that already. Like with 3 seconds left, I think. I mean, that can't be happening.
It's heart wrenching. Yeah.
If you're Carey Price, you have to be going into the locker room during that intermission and just kicking yourself in the stomach for that one. I mean, it's so unfortunate. And then that right there was kind of like, well, this game's over. They just took all the advantage, the momentum, whatever we had. We don't have it anymore. They just literally beat us down. Buzzer beater goal. And yeah, they still have another period, but that hurts. That last goal with a second, 2-3 seconds left, it kills them. And you kind of knew they weren't going to be able to come back for that. But game 4 is going to be interesting because you don't know if Tampa Bay is going to sweep the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, a lot of people are saying that this Tampa Bay Lightning and the Islanders series feels more like a Stanley Cup Finals than
especially
this.
if you're in New York. That's what it felt like.
Of course, and like these games are kind of just uninteresting and really hard to watch because by the second period it could be 4-1 in every single one of these games. So the matchup between the Lightning and the Canadiens is so far unparalleled. It's insane. And without Carey Price, this team is not even close to being in the situation they are now.
I think it's safe to say that the Canadiens are being held by Carey Price, almost like being held together by a single Band-Aid. And it's just stretched to its maximum stretch, whatever that term is. But Mike, Andrei Vasilevsky has been, I think he's going to be the MVP of the series. Okay. I just wanted to talk about him and the Tampa Bay Lightning as a team. First of all, I watched game 3. I was able to catch the second period. Man, can they fly up and down that ice? Those Lightning, they live up to their name. They fly. And I know that height hurts in sports and physicality can hurt too, but speed absolutely kills. And that has been proven by the Tampa Bay Lightning, the way that they just skate so fluently up and down that ice. And Andrei Vasilevsky, the importance of having a great defense on a championship team in any sport, I think we can agree, is how you're going to win. And Andrei Vasilevsky, who is by far and away the best goaltender in hockey, 18 saves in game 1. He only allowed 1 goal. Game 2, 42 saves. That's just, I don't even know, an incomprehensible amount of saves for me. And in game 3, 32 saves. Now, in the first 3 games, and pretty much like the 3 games that mattered, because I think Tampa Bay is going to sweep, Vasilevsky has had a save percentage in all 3 of those games above 91%. So it's hard for me to not give him the Stanley Cup MVP award. He's just been that good and anchoring that Tampa Bay defense. And I think it's safe to say with Vasilevsky on his game, that Tampa Bay team goes, man. And that their defense and the way that they skate, like I said, creates opportunities for them to score. And they've just they've pretty much done what they've wanted to the Canadians. So I think the series is over. Montreal's being held together by that Band-Aid. But you know what? For the Canadians, good job. You got here. You got your 24 Stanley Cups. You know, you can come back next year with Tampa Bay. They could still be here, but man, the Tampa Bay Lightning, they're just really good.
Yeah, they're really good. And I think one of the differences too is this defense Tampa has. I mean, they're just another level of physicality I don't think the Canadians have really seen. And the problem, I think, is that there's been a lot of stupid mistakes made by the Canadians. I mean, I go back to game 2. I mean, Joel Edmondson makes an awful error that leads to a third goal. He kind of like passes it backwards, trying to find someone. It totally gets picked off for a goal. And you just can't have those errors if you want to beat the reigning champions, if you want to beat the Lightning. Like, those can't really happen. Like, you got to be more physical. You got to limit the stupid mistakes, and then you got to execute the opportunities. So all those things really need to come to place for me in order for the Canadians to turn the series around and at least get one win for your home fans. And that's my next question, Mike, I want to toss to you. Is it over for the Canadians? I know we talked a lot. We all think it's going to be done Monday night, but what do the Canadians have to do in order to turn this series around and at least maybe get a win or two before it's over?
Well, so your first question, yes, I think the Canadians are done. Do I think they're done Monday? Possibly not. Like, it's very possible for them to get a win in Montreal on Monday. I'm not going to say that, but do I think they can come back from a 3-0 series? No, I do not. I think that this is the Lightning series to win and the Lightning series to lose. If they start playing like slacking and not skating, not getting pucks on net, then yes, sure, the Canadians have a chance. But John Cooper has made it, the Lightning's head coach has made it very clear that they don't care if they're up 6-1 in a game, 7-1 in a game. They're going to have 3 forwards on their power play. They're going to be sending out their best guys at every possible moment because the game's not over until the whistle blows. And I love that mentality by them. So sure, I guess the series is over, but Monday night, possibly not. And you have to ask me the other question again. I forgot what you said.
No, like, what do the Canadians have to do? I mean, I think you mentioned a little bit, but is it just being more efficient? And then is it a lot of it on Tampa not playing well? Or can the Canadians do something to maybe get them a win or get out in front early? Because they haven't even had a lead in this series.
Yeah, they just have to come out of the locker room right when the game starts, the first whistle, and put everything they have on the ice. They have to be willing to get hit and give big hits to the Tampa Bay Lightning. They also have to wish the Tampa Bay Lightning slack a little bit, like I just said. And if they don't do that, they're going to have a difficult time. But they need to get as many shots on net as they can against Vasilevsky. Like last night, there was a goal scored that was right at the blue line, and Vasilevsky was kind of sleeping a little bit. He never got off of his legs. He never got off his knees, was on the ice where he should have been on his skates standing up. The puck goes right over his shoulder. And they have to look for opportunities like that where they see Vasilevsky kind of sleeping a little bit. And if he doesn't know where the puck is, shoot that puck. Because if you shoot the puck, there's at least 2 to 3 guys in front of the net every single shot who can deflect it in or just tip in or something like that, shoot it off of them and it goes in. You never know. But the Canadians have to come out fast, and they have to really want this if they want to get a win, no less win the series. I mean, they have to come out with all of their energy. They need to find some motivation in that locker room. Maybe it's that they're still home in game 4. They're in Montreal. They want to do this for their fans. They want to be the first Canadian team to win a cup in some years. So we have to see what they do. But in order for them to win, they have to come out on their toes. They have to get as many shots on net as possible and play as physical as they did in game 1. I mean, that was a very intense physical game, and it really brought a lot of emotion from the stands. Obviously, it was in Tampa, but a lot of Montreal's fans were in Tampa. So we have to see. But as long as they can come out on their toes, shoot, play like they want to win this series, then they have a chance to win at least a couple games.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, and I know we're all going to be watching Monday night, or at least all the hockey fans will be. So Lightning up 3-0. Hopefully the Canadians can make this a series so we can keep watching. Mike, thanks for joining us. You're going to be staying with us after this break. We're going to cut to a little break. Then Mike's going to give us headlines, NCAA, Washington football team, and Sha'Carri Richardson. We're going to get to all those just after this break.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show, alongside Mike Calamari and Thomas Aiello. I'm Mike Messina with the headlines. And guys, a time that has finally come, a period where pretty much everyone in sports has been waiting for. The NCAA imposes a policy where athletes can finally get paid for the use of their name, image, and likeness. And I'm sure you guys have seen athletes around the world in all different sports showing their emotions on social media. You have JJ Redick saying he would have made a bag if this was an option when he was in college. Obviously, the whole Reggie Bush situation that is somewhat unfolding in front of us right now. There's many players that are saying what they could have made, and it's shocking to me that this is coming in 2021. Far too long after a policy like this should have been imposed. Players can make money now off such things like their autographs, endorsement deals, and appearances they make, as long as they still follow the school's state, local laws and stuff like that, which is understandable. You have football player Graham Mertz from Wisconsin releasing and trademarking a logo that he put on his social media platforms. And you have an Iowa basketball player, Jordan Bohannon, has announced a branded apparel line that was released on Thursday. So players are already taking advantage of this new rule that is put in place. And I want to know, and I can guess what your guys' opinion is on this as well. But Thomas, let's start with you here. What is your opinion on the NCAA imposing this on players and now they can profit on themselves? And how do you think this really affects college athletes moving forward?
Good job, NCAA. Finally. You finally did something right. Finally used your noggins. You let the athletes really get the spotlight that they deserve. Now, I wanted to kind of touch on an interesting situation for a team that really could have made a lot of money, and that was that those early to mid-2000s USC football teams with Reggie and Lendell White, players like that, like they could have made so much money just to think about it. I mean, Reggie Bush was the face of college sports for that 2-year stretch he was at USC. And Lendale White was the Robin to Reggie's Batman. So they had a thunder and lightning duo in that backfield. They could have made a ton of money simply doing like thunder and lightning, like merchandise, things like that, or like a clothing line maybe themed around them. So it's things like that to think about. It's crazy. But for the NCAA to finally let the athletes make a little bit of money, that's a good move on them. And I think that this will help the athletes that are at smaller schools. Maybe they'll start to gain a little bit more of a spotlight. You mentioned Jordan Bohannon, who's at Iowa, the basketball player who played with Matt Garza. Obviously, no one thinks of Iowa when you think of college basketball. I mean, what goes on in Iowa? Field of Dreams? I have no idea. So that's kind of what you think of when you think of Iowa. But now that the NCAA is going to have him make money with a clothing brand that could put a spotlight on him, maybe that leads him to making the roster on an NBA team, or he gets in the G League before he goes overseas. So I think this is a good move. This definitely helps out a lot of those smaller school athletes. And shout out, as I said earlier in the show, Patrick Kelly of Fordham men's basketball and Chuba Ohams of Fordham men's basketball, who are about to be Barstool athletes for representing Fordham University. So kudos to them. And I hope Barstool, they pick up our very own Kelly Bright and Gigi Spear. They would also be great pickups for the Barstool athletes. But again, kudos to the NCAA for finally making a good move on their part.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like here. I mean, these are multi-billion-dollar industries. I mentioned it at the top of the show. I mean, ESPN, NCAA. I mean, they're profiting so much off of these athletes. I mean, NCAA usually makes over $1 billion every year. I mean, due to COVID, they only made 519, only 519. But these are making hundreds of $1 millions. Even ESPN Plus, where they have all their A10, ACC. They give you all these different sports for a subscription base, and they're really profiting off of these kids, people who want to watch certain athletes play. So I think that's really good here. And the other thing is that it gives athletes a chance to do some good. Like Trevor Lawrence had a GoFundMe with his girlfriend for COVID relief, and NCAA took that down because it was against their rules. And stuff like that can also benefit and be good for everyone. So there's a lot of ways to look at this that can benefit athletes. At the end of the day, this is really a tactical move for NCAA because they see some guys go into the G League. We have Jalen Green's an example of that. He's in the G League right now. So there are people going straight to professional basketball in place of going to play, let's say, in NCAA or for a team like Duke or North Carolina. So this is really a move to help keep those athletes. So it's a tactical move by NCAA, but it's one that's really we've been waiting for a while. And it opens up a lot of questions like Reggie Bush and all these things that make it fun for people like us to talk about.
And you mentioned certain athletes that make it fun to talk about. Zion Williamson, for example. I mean, if this was a rule when he was in college, you could only imagine how he could have profited. I know you said the GoFundMe thing, and I mean, I feel like for the NCAA to take stuff like that down before this is just ludicrous. I mean, what sense does that make? They're simply trying to help people. And they deserve to have that opportunity to help people. Not only can they help other people, they can help themselves. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, a guy who first overall, I mean, he should be able to make money for who he is and how good he is as an athlete, how good of a person he is outside of the field. It's just crazy that it has taken until 2021 for something like this to come and play, because you have to look back and say, like, well, do we owe things to anybody else who used to be a former athlete? I mean, people like Reggie Bush, we keep going back to him, but this is like such an important topic, and Reggie Bush is very vocal about this on Twitter. I'm sure you guys have seen some of the statements that have made and everything. So it's just sad that this is really how it comes down to. And let me ask you guys this, Mike, do you think that the NCAA will keep this for a long period of time, or do you think this is kind of a experimental time where they put this rule into effect and they can kind of take this away later? Or do you think this is it? It's in for the long term and they want players to actually profit off themselves for the long term?
It's a good point you make. I think there's a lot of questions there. I mean, obviously one question I have is what happens when some of these athletes are making upwards of thousands and who knows, millions of dollars, and they're going to school as college athletes. They're not professional athletes, but they're being paid like ones. I think that could run into some problems. I think there's good things about this, like if an athlete wanted to run a podcast, or if an athlete had a TikTok or YouTube channel and wanted to profit off of that, they should be allowed to do that. They shouldn't be killed just because they're a college athlete. Like they should be able to, the image and likeness is theirs to own. Like that's completely fine. But I also see the flip side. If these endorsements and these athletes, like you mentioned, Zion Williamson, let's say he was making $2-3 million while he was at Duke. What does that mean for college basketball? And some people argue it takes away the fun of it, that these are college athletes and they're not making money. So that's the flip side of the argument. I think NCAA needs to find the right balance. So I think it's a good stepping stone, but they need to watch how this works, because if these guys are starting to get paid like pro athletes, then it's going to take away a lot of what people watch college athletics for. But at the same time, everyone owns their image and likeness, and they should be able to do with it whatever they please. And if that means making money, I'm all for that. And a lot of these people don't end up going to the NBA. They don't end up playing basketball overseas, and they end up just being part of the workforce. And if it means they can make some money while they're at college, if it means for their parents, a lot of these kids don't always come from the greatest places where they need to support a family or a mother or father. This is something that can help them do that. So there's a lot of ways you can look at this. And I think NCAA just needs to be careful about, don't open the floodgates, but let's just watch how it works right now. And I think if it works out well, and if it's good for the players, and if it's good for the NCAA, then they'll keep it.
I'm on the side with you, Mike, as well. We definitely have to keep a close eye on what could happen here, because some of the college athletes, if you really think about it, have been deprived, I guess, of the credit that they deserve and the rewards that they should have had years ago. And now we keep going back to Reggie Bush. JJ Redick's another one. And if you really want to go back, the Fab Five at Michigan, who kind of really started this whole image money-making thing, because people were doing the black socks and making money off of that. And then they were taking the Michigan M and making money off of it. And then the players in their protests, they just wore plain t-shirts. They didn't wear the black socks, and they didn't take off the warm-up pants until the game started. So they try to protest against it. But Mike,
or how many like bootleg jerseys are online that you can find?
Right.
Like, that's also true.
Right. The bootleg jerseys and those fake ones. So, but I think you're right. They have to be careful with this. I think slowly but surely it'll start to open up. But if college athletes start to, I guess, abuse the rule is the word I'm looking for, that could be a real bad luck. And, with guys like Zion, Reggie, Kumar Rocker, Jack Leiter, big guys like that. Okay. If they they will probably make more money than the average college athlete. That's understandable. But if you get guys that go to Appalachian State, let's just say, and they're making like an NBA player salary of like $7 million, I think that's where they need to really be careful. But this is definitely a good step in the right direction for the NCAA.
Yeah, Mike, I thought you made a good point about some players possibly making upwards of $1 million, $2 million. And that comes another point where you have other athletes that attend college and other non-athletes that attend college, talking about maybe how it's unfair that they're making all this money and then they're here kind of left in the dark with having to fend for themselves and get a job. Because I know, and we all know, numerous college athletes have to go out and get a job, a second job. Even professional athletes get a second job in order to really just cover the cost of their living. And obviously, if you're a top college athlete, you're most likely on scholarship. But this just helps them with like living their life, like they can pay rent and stuff like that. So like, I don't really see anything bad. And if someone wants to have this topic of conversation of, oh, it's unfair, they get paid and I don't get paid, or they get more than I do, then too bad, honestly. I mean, I don't feel bad for those people. If you want to get the money that some other people deserve and should get, you got to really work harder and just like be an athlete and be ready to take on any challenge that is thrown to you if you want to get the money that these guys do. So it all comes down to that. And with that, let's move over to another unfortunate event, kind of like the Trevor Bauer incident. The Washington football team. This has been a developing story for quite a while now, and the ruling just came out that they were fined $10 million as a result of the league's investigation into their toxic workplace culture. However, there's been no suspensions to any front office personnel, not to Dan Snyder, not to anybody. There's been no loss of draft picks, and there's really been no charges at all for the Washington football team. Mike, what do you think of the way the NFL handled this? I know it's been an ongoing investigation for quite some time now, and most of the details that have came out we knew about for a while now. But what do you think about the way the NFL handled it and the punishments that were given down? Do you think there should be loss of draft picks, suspensions to anybody in the front office, any of their personnel? And really, what else should be done, if anything, to Dan Snyder and the Washington football team as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see the NFL handling this very well. I think in many ways it's a slap on the wrist. Now, $10 million, it's a lot of money, but
that's on a chair, by the way.
Yeah, and taking a draft pick, I think, is a more serious punishment, in my opinion, even if it's a 4th, 5th, or 6th round draft pick. But I think NFL is continuing to protect Dan Snyder here. I mean, he does not have a good history. I mean, he was refusing to change the Redskins get rid of their name that was the Redskins. He was refusing to change that for the longest period of time. Obviously, now they're the Washington football team, but he was one of the main people that was saying, we're not going to change it. We're not going to change it. And after heading into the 2020 season, it was clear that they should have, at least to him, but it was clear for a lot of people a while ago. So he has never been proved to be a great owner by any stretch. And also, something important is that Tanya Snyder will be taking over all the football operations. He's not even going to be dealing with them. So that really shows you what kind of owner he's going to be. They say he's going to focus on the new stadium plan and those matters, whatever that really means, but he will stay out of football operations for the near future, which really shows you probably his effect he had on the franchise. And it's not a good look for this Washington football team that's really trying to rebrand themselves. And then you have this controversy strike with a $10 million fine. It is a really bad look for this football team.
I mean, it's also part of the reason why they never field a good team. Now they've done pretty well with recent drafting. I know you have Chase Young, and they have a great front seven, and the secondary is really coming along. You've got Curtis Samuel, Terry Mack, but like, who wants to go to the Washington football team? Now, I do kind of want to say this. The only reason they really changed their name was because of the social justice thing, and they did it. It was a good move in the sense that they did that because they didn't really want to catch too much flack, so that was good on their part. But I mean, now that this stuff is really getting magnified and shown to us in a super bright light, now I understand why no one likes the Washington football team than the Redskins, because they're just, it's a clown show left and right. Everything from top to bottom is just a clown show. And, sexual allegations, we were talking about this earlier today with Trevor Bauer. And I mean, it's just creepy and unfortunate that this is even allowed to happen, but people wonder why no one wants to go to the Washington football team. Here you go. This is your reasoning. And going back to Mike, your draft pick thing, I think they should take away a first round pick. How about you start with that? Because Dan Snyder just never seems to get punished for some strange reason. Maybe Roger Goodell and him are buddies and they go to fishing trips every year. Who knows? But you should take away the first round draft pick. I mean, that's what I would do. But again, I'm not the commissioner of the NFL, but I would take away a first round pick and see what happens from there. Maybe see, how do you like it, dude? Kind of sort of like that.
Yeah, I definitely think.
I you can go, Mike. Sorry.
All right. I definitely think I'll be quick.
Okay,
I think there should be a loss of draft picks for the Washington football team. I mean, it's really the only way that people are going to realize that the league is serious with allegations like this, and they don't take it lightly. And Thomas, I thought you made a great point. Who is going to want to come to play for a team like the Washington football team if you have this toxic workplace culture? Just maybe you're not at the heart of it, but it's going to be going on. It's a possibility that's going on. How is that going to make players and personnel come from other organizations to work with you and be your colleague and really trust them and have their back with everything going on? No one's going to want to do that in situations like this. I mean, Dan Snyder hasn't really taken that much accountability for anything that's going on. I mean, the league put out the statement the other day, but for him, he has to really come out himself, say that the team's wrong for how they handled the situation, because we all know they are, and then put his foot down and start making some changes, which have started as the article said, but something has to be done. And whether that's give him a loss of draft picks or maybe he should even be suspended. I mean, he's the owner of the team. All the repercussions should and have a good chance to come down all on him. I mean, he is the guy in charge. If he knows this kind of stuff is going on and he knew about it and kind of let it happen, then I have nothing else to say, because that is incredibly wrong. And for him to not get really any punishment besides a slap on the wrist, $10 million, it is crazy to me.
Yeah, I just want to mention one more thing before we move on. A couple shows ago, I want to say about 2 or 3 months ago, when the Aaron Rodgers news started to first break, I thought, Washington football team, that's a good spot for him. They've got a great defense. They've got developing offense. They've got a pretty good offensive line. And I was thinking, what's a good spot for him to go to? That's an open, wide division. He could walk through there and dominate them. I was like, Washington football team. Now you got a situation like this with the whole culture investigation resulting in a $10 million fine. I mean, that really just shows you that this is not a place that's going to welcome any free agents. I mean, obviously, I don't think Rodgers is going to sniff this team or even touch them with a 10-foot pole. So I think that's out now, but it's crazy how a team that looked like they were turning around their branding just took a bunch of steps backwards.
Michael, don't you dare take away Aaron Rodgers from me. Don't you dare bring up that topic. I will cry. I will cry in the air right now.
If he went for another day, definitely. Talk for another
Don't
day.
dare. How dare you bring up the Washington football team for Aaron Charles Rodgers? Are you kidding me? Come on. Don't you dare do that.
Listen, they have a good setup. All they need is a quarterback. So back then it seemed good. Now it's unrealistic.
Don't you dare.
Yeah, I don't see Aaron Rodgers going to be the quarterback of the Washington football team. Talking about suspensions, though, let's get into American sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson, who's not going to be able to participate in the 100-meter event at the Tokyo Olympics due to a positive marijuana test. She failed. She said she smoked marijuana after her mother's death because she had anxiety and she wanted that to kind of help her with it, which she says it did. And again, like the NCAA rule, you see a lot of athletes coming out and kind of supporting her, such as Odell Beckham Jr., Damian Lillard, Dwayne Wade, Isaiah Thomas, Marcus Lattimore, and so many people from different sports and some politicians who are going to social media showing their displeasure that she's not going to be able to run just due to something that is legal in 19 states. She's doing it. It's not a performance-enhancing drug. It's not doing anything to make her better. If anything, it's going to make her worse, honestly, especially sprinting. That's not going to get her any faster than what she already is. So to not let her run in the Olympics is crazy. And I don't understand how this is allowed and why it's really just not legal in all states. So let me ask you guys, what's your opinion, Mike, on her not being able to run it? And do you think that it's kind of a stupid rule that just because she failed a drug test for marijuana that she's not allowed to run? Or do you agree and think that, oh, well, she knows the rules and she made that decision to do this anyway and knew she was going to get tested, that it's kind of her own fault in this situation?
Yeah, I see both sides of it. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, the rule's the rule, and you might not like it, but it's there, and it's unfortunate that it's probably a stupid rule, but she knew that, and she even admitted, like, yeah, I knew the rule, I knew what I did, and she was not blaming anyone. She took all the blame, but it is a stupid rule. I mean, it's legalized in 19 states, and I'm almost positive that the states in which she had done marijuana or smoked marijuana were legalized. So when you think about that,
she did it.
100%. So for those reasons, it's really crazy, and it's not a performance enhancer. The Olympics should only be testing for performance enhancing drugs, something that can affect the output that you see at the Olympics. But I don't understand really. I guess the Olympics is delayed in the response. Obviously, United States has a bunch of motions. New York just legalized marijuana, New Jersey before that, and the Olympics probably a little behind there. But I don't understand why they're testing for substances that obviously are not going to be a performance enhancer, especially marijuana or any smoking substance is not going to help you as a runner. As a endurance runner, 100% worse, but even as a 100-meter dash runner, it's not going to help you. And she's one of the best. I mean, she's the sixth fastest woman in the world. I mean, she had 10.75 100-meter dash when she was in college in 2019. So she was like the front runner to win this race. And if not the front runner, she was one of them at the top of this list. So when you think about all of that, it's a stupid rule. And not the NCAA changing to the Olympics need to handle this, and they need to figure out what are we testing for, what's really matters. And in my opinion, that's performance enhancing drugs, not marijuana.
I just wanted to say that, first of all, the obvious, to quote Stephen A. Smith, stay off the weed. Now, I have no problem with athletes using weed in recreational situations. That's fine with me. I mean, I'm not into that, but if that's what they want to do in their free time, be my guest. I have no problem with it. But like you said, Mike, the rule is the rule. And, it could be a stupid rule if you want to look at it that way. I do agree in the sense that weed is just it's a nothing drug. It doesn't make you better or worse than anything. It might make you a little lightheaded, and you might not be thinking as straight, but physically it doesn't make you stronger. It doesn't.
It's not a performance enhancer. Yeah.
Right. It's not a PED, but the whole Olympics, they're just all freaked out from the thing with Russia all those years ago. And they pretty much sent their entire Olympic team on steroids and juices and whatnot. They're all freaked out about that. So that's why really they're just punishing her. But, like you said, the rule is the rule. I agree. Cannabis is legal in 19 states. But I mean, I don't know. Do you delete the rule at this point? I have no idea. Like, it's just, if you know you're not supposed to do it, you really shouldn't do it. but I'm glad that she took it like a champ and she took the blame like a champ. And that I thought was the best part, that she owned up to it and she knows that she was in the wrong. But again, I don't know. It's whatever to me, honestly. If you don't want the rule, don't want the rule. I don't care.
Yeah, like I understand she knew the rule and she admitted it on live television. She said it was her choice. She knew the rule. She knew what she was doing, and that's the end of it. But from another standpoint, it's legal in 19 states, was legal in the state she used it in. It's legal in other sports. You can smoke weed in the UFC. Nate Diaz does it on stage before his fight, in his pregame press conference, and his postgame press conference in front of everybody. And don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure you're allowed to do it in the offseason for the NBA as well. You guys will know more than that from me. Exactly. So if more sports are being lenient on recreational use of marijuana, as long as it's not a PED, then I have no issues with this. And the Olympics kind of has to start following other sports. I mean, if there's other sports, which there is, who are loosening up their rules on smoking weed and other supplements that aren't PEDs, and they're starting to allow it, then I feel like all sports should like kind of come together and really do the same thing. So, the rule that there has to be like a baseline for all of these things around sports. If it's legal in one, it should be legal in all. If it's illegal in one, I think it should be illegal in all. And obviously it's never going to happen that way. But in order for people to, I guess, know what's going on, there needs to be a baseline, and there obviously isn't. And it sucks to see that she's not going to be able to run, because she has a great chance of winning this. And because considering she's one of the best female runners, sprinters there is, I mean, it's just unfortunate to see such a woman who worked so hard in order to be in the position she is, that it's kind of just all down the drain now and for nothing.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, and you really got to feel bad for Sha'Carri Richardson. It's terrible news, and she knew what she was doing, but at the same time, we can all agree it was not a good rule that the Olympics have. That's going to be all for the headlines. Mike, thank you for joining us. We're going to head to a quick break. When we get back, we're going to go overseas. We're going to talk some Euros, some Wimbledon, some soccer, some tennis. It's going to be great talk. We'll be back right after this break.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back to One on One. I'm Michael Calamari here with Thomas Aiello. We are here with you till 2 a.m. So we're going to finish out the show, Thomas. We got two big tournaments going on right now. We got the premier tournament in tennis, Wimbledon. But first, I want to get to some European Championship talk. That is going on right now. And we got a huge matchup coming up on the left side of the bracket. Italy just defeats Belgium to advance, and then Spain marks their place into the semifinals. Thomas, I mean, I just want to get your reaction to what we've seen from those two teams so far. Italy's really looked like the most dominant team, in my opinion. Lorenzo Insigne has been exceptional for Italy as an offensive threat. He hits a great curled shot to give him a lead there. But it's also been a story about Spain, who's been winning games. They've been doing job. They've had a little close calls, especially in extra time, 2 straight games. But there's a lot there, but it's going to be a great matchup with these two teams. And I just want to get your thoughts on that, which is going to be coming up.
Well, first of all, Mike, we're both Italian, so we have no reason to not root for the Italians to win. And secondly, the joke with the Italian national team, and this has been like a thing, is that they just play until they're 50. But they love to keep their teams together. You know, you had Andrea Pirlo, Marchisio for a long time with Chiellini and all those boys, and Gigi Buffon. But now this is a very different Italian team. You have Lorenzo Insigne, who, on all honesty, plays like a FIFA glitch. Like, he doesn't just seem like a normal player. He just runs around the pitch like a crazy person because he's that good speed. Ciro Immobile, and you've got Barella, the pasta. I call him the Pasta Man. I think that's a funny nickname for him, the Pasta Man. But this Italian team has just been rejuvenated with the boost of youth and energy, and I love it. I honestly do think that it's serving them well. You still have Giorgi Chiellini in the back with Bonucci. Of course, they're the elder statesmen, and they're kind of leading the whole thing. But like you said, the Italians have just been crushing everyone. They beat Belgium 2-1, and Belgium is a really good team. Now, I know that there's a lot of talk around Eden Hazard. Is he still in shape? I still think he's a little fat, but that's a discussion for another day. Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku, I mean, they've got a tremendously talented team, but the Italians they were simply better. And you had goals from Insigne and Barella, the Pasta Man. So I like the Italians a lot. I like the way that they play. I liked how they've redone their team, renovated it a little bit. And Gigi Donnarumma in goal, they continue this theme with Gigi's in the net with Buffon, and now you got Donnarumma back there, and they're both gigantic human beings. So trying to get past them is a task in and of itself. But to switch to Spain's side of things, I mean, it's a very strange Spain team, Mike. I think we can agree. You know, they don't see Sergio Ramos, who I kind of thought would be in that lineup versus Switzerland, but they struggled through it. And you still have Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba, Koke. Like, they're still in there, still kind of the staples of that Spanish team. But if you're having trouble beating Switzerland, who is probably not as talented as Spain should be, you know, that raises concern for me. I think the Italians got this. I think there's no reason they don't beat Spain. I think if they do, I'm not going to say it's going to be an onslaught, but it'll definitely be like a 2-1, 1-0 kind of game. So I'm going to roll with the countrymen. I'm rolling with the Italians here.
Yeah, I think Italy is really the favorites here. The question coming into this tournament is, where were they going to get their goals from? The defense is always sound with Italy, but the offense was of concern. Lorenzo Insigne, Immobile, those are relatively unproven commodities, especially on this stage. But they've been anything but. They've proven that they are the goal scorers that we thought they were from their seasons in Serie A. So you can't be worried about them anymore. And you also have to look at the defenders. I mean, look at Giorgio Chiellini. Look at Leonardo Bonucci. I mean, these guys are still two of the best center backs in all football. I mean, I want to pull a tweet from Bastian Schweinsteiger. He tweeted out that these are the two best center backs in the world, to summarize his tweet. That's what he basically said. They are still the two best. And you can look at that saying that they've been in there for so long. They've really been there with that old group, Andrea Pirlo, Claudio Marchisio, like you said. And now they're developing these young guys that kind of handing the baton to them. And it's really remarkable to see that these two older guys match with these younger group, like you mentioned, is making for really an Italian team that feels like the team of destiny. I mean, they beat that Belgium team that was considered their golden era. I mean, they have Kevin De Bruyne. He's 2019-2020 midfielder of the year in Premier League. You have Romelu Lukaku, who really made renamed himself in this series. He had been forgot about after leaving the Premier League, but he's reaffirmed himself as a top goal scorer. Eden Hazard was in and out of this entire tournament, dealing with health issues and fitness issues. But I mean, his brother Thorgan Hazard was electric for them. So this was the team. They were the number one ranked team in the world by FIFA. So when you defeat a team like that, especially Italy, who did it pretty convincingly. I mean, the only goal they suffered was off a penalty, and I mean, a clear penalty, but that's the only goal they're suffering. And this defense is completely sound. And they're 32 games unbeaten with their new coach. This is the team to beat, and there's nothing to be but impressed by what they've done. I mean, the only real area of concern you have is no Spinazzola, who was phenomenal for them in that game against Belgium, a clear difference maker. But he's detrimental if he's not going to be with them for this game against Spain. They'll be able to recover. They're going to find someone that will be able to fill that void he leaves, but it's still a loss nonetheless. You got to think they're the favorites against Spain. Spain doesn't really have anybody that jumps out of you. They have a lot of older guys. You mentioned Busquets. Juan Mata is still with them. But, I mean, they had trouble scoring on Switzerland. I mean, Summer looked absolutely fantastic for them and for Switzerland in the net. So I'm not sold on Spain. I think it's going to be a little tough because any team with championship pedigree is going to be tough to beat. But I think Italy's clearly the team that is going to be the favorites in this game and then heading forward into the final, whoever they play.
I think you make a good point losing Spazzarola. I mean, anytime you lose a good fullback in soccer, it just kills you because you lose a lot of depth out on the flanks. You lose more opportunities to cross into the box, maybe get a header in or two. Sometimes those fullbacks take corner kicks, and those could be maybe your only guy that takes it. So losing him is huge. But remember earlier in the show, I said, don't underestimate the power of old people. Remember I said that earlier in the show? Yeah, don't underestimate the power of Giorgi and Leonardo Bonucci, okay? Because like you said, Bastian Schweinsteiger put it best. I wouldn't say that they're the best, but I think of a duo, and in terms of smarts, I don't know if you can find any duo that's better than those two. And they've been in every different sort of scenario with the Italian team, all different sort of teammates. They've been to World Cups. They've won championships with their clubs and with the Italian team. So they know what it takes to win. And I think they're going to rely on that. And like you said, for Spain, they have trouble scoring. And it's an older team. You know, I said, again, don't underestimate the power of old people. But Spain is just this weird youthism with old people kind of running around, still doing stuff. I mean, I don't know. They just look a little blah to me against Switzerland. But the Italians, I think they've got the offensive thing figured out between Immobile and Lorenzo Insigne. I think that's enough to kind of get you past Spain. And then whoever they play in the final, of course, which is probably, I think it'll be England, but I think they can get the job done. They've got enough on the offensive front, and defensively they're rocks, and they got to find a way to get past the loss of Spazzarola. But anything can happen, I think, in this next game versus Spain.
Yeah, I think anything can happen, but I mean, if Italy is able to win, which is probably the likelihood that they would move past the Spain team, they're looking at a potential matchup with either a Denmark team or an England team. These are two teams that we will most likely see Italy play. Now, if Italy makes the finals against England, that will be in Wembley. So that changes it a little bit. I mean, England is a different team in Wembley. So I think that's really interesting to know. With the home fans around England, honestly, Italy will have their support there, but that is going to be dominated by England fans. That's going to be tough for them to be. I mean, we saw what England did to Germany. I mean, that was a great game, and it is clear that this England team is not what we've seen in past national tournaments. I mean, Raheem Sterling is the best player on this team by far. You can say what you want about Harry Kane. He was great in the Premier League, but he's never really proven himself in the national stage. He only has one goal in this Euro tournament. It's really Raheem Sterling who is the guy for this team. And that defense, that back three for them, talk about Stone is a great defender. I mean, Kyle Walker, amazing. Maguire, this is a good back three that is really putting up clean sheets left and right. And then on the wing back side, you've got Luke Shaw and you've got Trippier. I mean, these are a good defensive sound. It's just the offense that's got to come together for England. So that's the only real question against Italy. If England shows their offense and are able to put one past, it's going to be a tough game because this English defense is really good. There's a lot of questions there, but it's going to be really interesting to see. Now, there's also a lot of hypothetical. Will England make the final? Will Italy make the final? But that's what we do. We talk and we make hypotheticals and we see, what if, and that's probably the biggest what if. England, Italy would be a really intriguing final. Now, before we end, I want to head over to the grass courts in Wimbledon. I want to talk a little tennis. On the men's side, you have Djokovic, who's the clear front runner. He's been dominating this entire playoffs. He comes off the French Open win. He has 17 straight major matches. So that's unheard of. And then on the women's side, it's completely wide open without Naomi Osaka. Barty's there, Sabalenka. Coco Gauff won her match this morning. So there are people in there. I want to start with the men's side. Thomas, do you think anyone can stop Novak Djokovic?
I do. Now, it's crazy to think that Novak Djokovic can be stopped because breaking news, if you don't know this, he's a human being. So at some point, he's going to hit the wall. And my pick for that is Alex Zverev from Germany. The young man, he's 24 years old, 6'6". The reason why I like him is because the way if you watch him play, the way that he just wants to just dominate the opponent instantly off of the first serve, that alone will throw Djokovic off and be like, whoa, okay, so we're doing this. And he's a big guy. I remember Djokovic saying in a press conference that Zverev moves well for a guy his size. Again, 6'6". Like in tennis, you might have a hard time moving. John Isner, we've seen that in the past with him. He's like 6'10", and he really couldn't play the net that well, or at least running back and forth. Now he was like an octopus. He could just stretch his arms out like this. But with Zverev, the kid is just physically imposing. He tries to wear down the opponent every time. From the opening serve to the final volley, he's going at you 125%. And if he's going to be playing that power game that he likes on the baseline, Djokovic, I mean, he can do it, but if he's going to get really worn down by this kid, I don't really see Djokovic coming out with a win. And Zverev just won his match today in 3 out of 4 sets with the tiebreaker. So he's going to be moving on. But that Alex Zverev is my guy to beat Djokovic. That's the only guy I think that can do it. Physically, he can do it. And in terms of style of play, he can definitely do it.
Yeah, I think that Zverev is definitely a guy who's one of the top players in the world. But I'm just not sure when I look at Djokovic, I just see such a dominance that I really haven't seen since Federer's peak, which honestly isn't that long ago. But since Federer was one of the great, I mean, Djokovic has 19 Grand Slams. I mean, he's absolutely unreal. And what he does that's so impressive is that he's okay when he goes down to 1 or 2 sets. I mean, that's okay for him. He did that in the French Open. He went down set 1 to Nadal in the semifinals, and he won every single set and beat him out. Same thing with Tsitsipas in the final. I mean, Tsitsipas was playing absolutely great tennis up to that point. He takes the first 2 sets. He's 1 set away from winning the French Open. Djokovic comes back and wins 3 straight to win. So, I mean, we see this from Djokovic. He starts off slow and then he beats you. And I'm just not sure there's a player out there that is going to be able to contend with that. And the way I've been seeing him play, it's tough to think there is if someone out there that can take him down. And he's coming off the French Open win and he's playing more tennis than anybody recently, but I don't think that's going to take away from the way he's playing. I see him walking through this Wimbledon and winning it all. Obviously, anything can happen, but he's still my pick to win it.
I mean, you bring up a fair point, and Djokovic has been the best tennis player for a long time. Now, if we were in the year 2011, I think Federer would be the only guy that could beat him. I think, in fact, he would beat him. But, he's almost 40, or he is 40 at this point pretty much. He can't move the way he used to. He's an old man, to say it the least. And I know I'm going to say it one more time. Don't underestimate the power of old people. But for Federer, I mean, he goes beyond 3.5 sets. He's done. Okay, he can't last that long anymore. His backhand, while it's still very good, the rest of the game overall is not where you want it to be. And the experience, I mean, could help, but Djokovic is just that good. And I'm going to go back to Zverev real quick. The reason why I picked him, he's won Wimbledon before. He's young, he's big, and he plays a completely different game. It's not finesse, it's power. It's just overtake instantly. So I don't know Djokovic, as dominant as he is. I think he's a great tennis player, might be the greatest tennis player of our generation when it's all said and done. But I think he's got all the tools to do it, and he's the only guy I can really see. I mean, you look at some of the other guys that are left in the field. Mendeviv is not really. I don't see him doing it. I don't really know who else is left. I mean, some of the Italian guys, but they're really not that good. So it's either Zverev or bust at this point.
Yeah, I could see how you can see that, and we're only going to have to watch and see. And I think it's even more interesting. We're talking about so much about who's challenging Djokovic. There isn't really that person on the other side in the women's singles. I mean, Barty is the number one ranked player for this tournament. You also have Krejcikova, who's coming off a French Open champion, Sabalenka, Coco Gauff. So there's a lot of people in the women's singles that could potentially win this. And without Naomi Osaka, it's really open for grabs. For me personally, I like Krejcikova. She's on a 14-match winning streak. She's the French Open champion. She would be the first woman since Serena in 2015 to win the French Open and Wimbledon back-to-back. But I really think she's a strong player, and she has what it takes to win this all. She's been great in this tournament. Barty has shown a little struggle. She barely survived her Thursday match against Svitolina. She has erratic serving at times. She had 33 unforced errors in that game. So for a number one player in the world, I think she is showing signs that she might go down soon. It could not happen now. It could happen in the round of 8, in the quarterfinals, semifinals, whatever it is. But what I see from Krejcikova makes me believe she is the front runner out of the women's singles.
I think Barty might be the default here. And I mean, look, I'm not going to discredit the women's field. They're very talented, but Barty is just the number one overall, like you said, by far and away the best player left on the women's draw. But, if Serena was here, maybe you think she's got one more in her. Could she pull a Wimbledon out? She's been so dominant on the grass, but she's gotten old. Obviously, she had a kid recently, and that kind of did a number on her a little bit. You could see she's a little bit more tired, deeper in the matches, and that obviously isn't a good thing. I would say 5 or 6 years ago, Victoria Azarenka would be my pick, but she obviously she lost all her mojo pretty much. And Coco Gauff, while I do think she's going to be the next great United States women's tennis player, and I really think she's a very good player, by the way, competitive. She wants to win. She'll get hurt. She'll play with a broken leg. I don't think she'll care, but she's still too young. I don't think she's ready to take over. So I think it's Barty or bust. But if I wanted to give one sleeper, I'm kind of stick with the German theme here. Angelique Kerber, who has been a top 5 player. She's been a top 5 in the world rankings for a good number of years. I don't think that we can sleep on her because she's, like I said, she's been around. She knows what she's doing. She has a good balance of power and finesse. She can play the net pretty solid, and she can volley, which is her thing. So I think Angelique Kerber, I guess, if I'm going to pick a sleeper, it would be her, simply because she's got the experience to do it. But again, women's side, it's Barty or bust. There's no one else really that can stop her.
Yeah, I see that. I think Coco Gauff's been really good. I mean, go back to Wimbledon in 2019 when she upset Venus Williams and made the quarterfinals. She's a much more confident player, athlete than she was in 2019. So I think she got that far 2 years ago when she was 15 years old. She's 17 now, much more confident. I honestly think she has a chance here to at least make a deep run into this Wimbledon finals. Here in Krejcikova, I think those are the two best chances of winning this Wimbledon. But listen, sports are heating up, and we're going to be watching Wimbledon, and we're going to see, does Zverev win it like you say? Does Djokovic win it like I think? Who's going to win on the women's singles? And then, like we mentioned there, a European championship. Will it be England? Will it be Italy? We're all going to have to find out and see. But there's a lot of sports and a lot to watch, and it's going to be really interesting as that comes up. But that will do it for tonight's show. Thank you for all who tuned in. For more one-on-one, tune in to Nightly on Wednesdays from 8:30 p.m. to 10. And catch up on all of our interviews, podcasts, and more at WFUVsports.org and on our YouTube channel. Bobby Chavardini is a sports director of WFUV. From me, Thomas, Alex Wools on the production, and Mike Messina with the headlines, have a great night. One-on-One is a production of WFUV Sports.